9 times out of 10, you do not want to get fired from your job. Because do not forget, if you are let go, it probably means you're not going to make any money and you're going to wake up every day going, ah! It's just what we as human beings do. I don't know what that noise was. But when it comes to the world of professional wrestling, especially a few years ago before the birth of AEW, there were a lot of superstars who were like, listen, I'm having a really good time, but please, oh please, can I just leave? So my name is Simon from WhatCulture, and yes indeedy, this is 6 times WW wrestlers tried and failed to get themselves fired. Number 6, the Revival. So you always imagined that it was going to be quite hard for the Revival when they did go from NXT to the main roster, because they were super duper proud, as they should have been, of being professional wrestlers and not sports entertainers. And they even said this a few times. As we know, Vince McMahon did not like that word. Dustin Dawson still went out there every single time and had killer matches, but you could kind of see the frustrations, especially when they started subtweeting the likes of New Japan Wrestling and the Young Bucks, and at one point they even came out wearing gear that had hashtag FTR on it, which was an in-joke that wasn't happening with inside WWE. It was happening in other promotions. I mean, flipping Cody Rhodes had started that when he had said flub the Revival on an episode of BTE. So this was like all our worlds coming together, or like a forbidden door being opened. Remember those days when no one knew what that meant? Ah, that was great. There were even rumors after this that they were so frustrated that they got a sit-down meeting with Vince McMahon and told him, look, we ain't very happy here because we just want to do really good wrestling stuff and you're making us be in feud with the Usos where we have to rub ass cream on us. And apparently WWE still offered them bumper deals, but they said, no, we're not interested. So when their contracts did run out, they went, of course, to All Elite Wrestling. But before this, were they trying to get fired? Well, they were certainly trying to do something else. Number 5, Ryback. When Ryback came to the main roster in 2012, it was quite clear we were putting the rocket boots on him and were going to try and send him to the moon, because he went on a crazy undefeated streak, which ended in a WWE Championship match. Now, he never won the belt, but I tell you this, when you're just starting to be a professional wrestler, if somebody tells you, oh, hey, one day you're going to be with the biggest company and they're going to make you a super duper star, well, you'd probably be quite excited. This is a very hard position to try and keep, though, and after he did have that match with CM Punk, all of a sudden he started tumbling down the card to the point in 2016 he was put in a tag team with Curtis Axel, and yes, they called them Rybaxel or something stupid like that, and here I am in 2022 and I have never gotten over it. It clearly got to Ryback, as I suppose it would most of us, because he started walking to the ring with a weight belt around his waist that had the words "the pre-showstopper" on it, basically saying to WWE officials, why do you keep putting me on the kickoff show when I used to be in the main event? Once again, we do turn to the rumor mill, because apparently during one of these matches where he was wearing it, referee John Cone was told in his ear, tell Ryback to take that thing off, to which Ryback responded, no, you go tell them to go flub themselves. And he did not say flub. Clearly the former Skip Sheffield must have thought eventually this would get him back in the good graces, but instead he was booked for a random Battle Royal Honor show, and this time realized he needed to do something bigger, so he went home, and we actually never saw him again. Not just in WWE, any promotion. He quite literally vanished. Number 4, EC3. EC3's journey through WWE has been absolutely crazy, because he was part of NXT way back in the day, and most people looked at him and thought, well, he'll absolutely get to the main roster. But instead, he left that contract, he went to TNA, made a name for himself, got even more jacked, got even more muscular, so once again fans were like, oh, now he's going to go back to WWE, and he's going to be a huge success. And he did right in NXT, but when he got to Raw and SmackDown, Vince McMahon decided, well, you know what, I don't want to do anything with you, and he never did. I mean, it didn't help that he lost his first match in front of a new audience to the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, even if his opponent was Dean Ambrose. But the bit that will blow your mind is that Ethan the Carter III, that's not his name, Ethan Carter III's main skill was the fact that he could cut a pretty good promo. So how much microphone time did we give him? 0. Before long, he was part of the Chasing 24/7 pack, which is never good. And this isn't a slight on him, but if you go and watch these segments, you can tell that EC3 had just given up because he could see the writing on the wall. So I would presume he was like, well, maybe if I look like I don't care, eventually they'll get rid of me. But for a long ass time, they didn't. Instead, it took to the pandemic in 2020 when from nowhere, WW made a bunch of releases and EC3 was one of them. But I tell you this, kind of feel like he wanted to go long before this. Who could blame him? Number 3, Charlotte Flair. Okay, so we go back to Murmur City for one last ride. But back in 2021, there were some very interesting reports of people saying Charlotte Flair may want out of WWE. Does anybody know what her contractual status is? Now, this was all hearsay, we must remember this. But then we got to that particular episode of SmackDown in October 2021, and a lot of people put their hands on their hips and said, is she trying to get fired? Because due to the roster draft, the 2 WWE Women's Championships were going to have to switch brand because the Raw Champion was going to have to go to SmackDown, the SmackDown Champion was going to have to Raw, and because sometimes WWE is like a playground, we did this by just changing belts. But when Charlotte was meant to pass hers to Becky Lynch, she just dropped it on the floor. And no, that wasn't planned. Now, I do see where the Queen was coming from because this was a stupid segment to write in the first place. But it did kind of seem like she was trying to get in trouble because do not forget what was happening over in AEW. Andrade was there, her then fiance. So yes, there was a conspiracy theory that this was Flair trying to get fired. But let's be honest, she is too big a star. I think WWE would rather send her home for 2 years than let her just walk out the door. But still, honestly, this was awkward TV. Let's never do it again. Number 2, Daniel Bryan. If you remember, after Daniel Bryan was forced into retirement, WWE would use him in a lot of non-wrestling roles, something that Mr. Bryan did not like, because all he wanted to do was wrestle. It got even worse after a few doctors actually went, oh, by the way, Dan, we think you're fine and you should get back in the ring, but WWE's like, no, we're too scared. Which is when Daniel Bryan decided, right, I need to get out of this company. What the hell can I do? If you want to see any of these attempts as well, all you have to do is load up Talking Smack when Bryan was a co-host, where he talks about fisting in relation to the old SmackDown fist and continually calls James Ellsworth a hog, even though a production official was like, would you please shut up? The most fascinating one, though, does come down to when he and The Miz were in the studio and Miz cut that fantastic promo. Now, Bryan has come out after the fact and said, yes, we planned it beforehand. And the original ending was that Daniel was going to punch him right in the face. Because as far as he saw it, either one, they'll go, oh man, this is a money feud, we better allow him to wrestle again, or 2, that's right, they'd fire his ass and he could go to New Japan. Thankfully, this all worked out in the end, but I do totally understand where he was coming from. If you love something and you're passionate about it, and it's right there, but you have to watch it from afar, you're probably gonna do whatever you have to get back involved. Number 1, Gail Kim. After having a really successful time in TNA, Gail Kim decided that maybe, just maybe, the time was right to return to WWE to try and show them the skill set she had. Much like her first run, I don't think WWE ever really understood what they had. You should always treat your performers with respect though, even if you aren't planning to push them, which did not happen on an August 2011 Raw. Because Gail was told, oh, by the way, you're going to be in a battle royal this evening, and you're going to be eliminated in the first minute by whoever. Yep, that was the plan. Somebody will just waddle up to you and chuck you over the top rope. Now, WWE cameras never broadcast this, but the stories are out there. But basically, Kim got to the ring. She punched Alicia Fox right in the face, basically goes, sell. Alicia does do that before she rolled out the ring, eliminated herself, and just walked to the back. So quite clearly Kim had seen the writing on the wall and wanted to go back to Impact Wrestling and thought the quickest and fastest way to get out of her contract was to throw herself out of a battle royal. I can't lie, I think it's quite clever. A few days later, Gail told her social media followers that she had quit the company, but actually what did happen was she was forced to sit out her contract, and we just talked about that. But you do have to respect her convictions here. All she wanted to do was have wrestling matches, and she was told no in a wrestling company. I mean, that just makes your face do this.
I am all for fun and games, but I will tell you, sometimes wrestling really goes too far. Because when you read about some of the ribs that were pulled throughout the years, you sort of pause and look off into the distance. How the hell did someone devise this sort of a prank in the first place? Even worse, depending how you watch wrestling, on occasion, it even makes it to TV. So do you want to get a feel of this? I presume you do, for I am Simon Miller, and Here's 10 times this went completely off the rails. Number 12, Mean Gene gets stung down low. Mystery is the name of the game sometimes in wrestling. Who was the higher power? Who ran over Steve Austin? Who was the devil in AEW? Or the Black Scorpion back in the day? And obviously there are more risque ones that enter the internet. Let's just say the name Batista and leave it there. It gets asked online all the time. Now, we're never going to know for sure about any wrestler unless something goes super bad, but poor Mean Gene Okerlund got wrecked on live TV when it did indeed come to his groin. He didn't even know it. Now, let's not forget this was during the so-called golden era when the WWF wanted to appeal to kids, which made this even more unhinged. But yep, when Mean Gene popped up backstage to do some interviews, his lower third read, Mean Little Dick Okerlund. Can't confuse that one. The issue, of course, is that somewhere out in Kansas, maybe, young Stevie definitely turned to Daddy and said, "Father, what is going on?" as poor Dad desperately tried to explain. I don't think this was the best idea. It should be no surprise that Mean Gene took it in his stride because he was just that way. He was ever the professional, unless a sign fell in the background, and then you could get to him. That's a different video for a different day. That is what makes this all the stranger though, because everybody knew he was never going to react to it, but we did it anyway. I will point out nobody would do that in modern times. Sponsors would absolutely lose their minds. Number 11, you better call Al Snow or Val Venus. Al Snow's feud with the Big Boss Man towards the end of 1999 is regularly brought up because it's totally insane. It ended with the Kennel from Hell match because during all of this, the Big Boss Man kidnapped Al Snow's dog Pepper and eventually invited Al to a hotel room and fed this pup to Mr. Snow. I'm not making that up, and rather than call the police, they had a big old fight in a cage. Before all this happened though, when we realised the boss man was involved, obviously Al Snow was looking for his beloved pet, so of course he made a poster. It had missing in big letters, had a picture of Pepper, and of course the big old question, have you seen this dog? We will give you a reward if you're able to give us some information. Al Snow then included a phone number and encouraged people to call in. As we soon found out afterwards though, because wrestling fans can't help themselves, this was not just some random numbers made up and put on the screen, it was actually Val Venus's real home telephone number. Venus didn't know anything about this too because it was a rib when all of a sudden people kept calling in their hundreds, and he's even said this in an interview, he had to tell so many people to leave him alone, but of course they didn't, it'd been on national TV. It got so bad that within 24 hours he disconnected his landline and he called up his provider and said, "Damn it, I need some new digits." Now I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been, but at the same time, when we do take a step back, there is an art of genius to that, even though it is super duper me. Saying that though, Val Venus has gone crazy these days, and maybe it started here. But yeah, all things considered, when you do break it down, it was kind of ingenious and super cruel at the same time. Maybe that is the art of a good prank. Number 10, Sonny's Slop Bucket. Sadly, this just seems the way in the mid-90s, which is why things are far better today. Wrestling is about trust, so that should always be at the center of things. Just make sure everybody is aware of what is happening. That didn't go down on June 26, 1996, as during a taping of WWF Superstars, Sonny was torn in the Godwins. Shouldn't have done that. Phineas and Henry were farmers, so they carried about a pig slop bucket, and as soon as Sonny tried to get involved, they poured it over her head. Now that is as sports entertainment as it does come, until you learn that this bucket was left unattended backstage, where apparently the roster decided to leave a large manner of uncouth things in the bottom of it. That meant when it was dumped over Sonny's head, well, maybe it's best not to think about it. Again, nobody would dare do it in WWE right now, and if they did, they would be fired. I mean, health and safety alone. You just don't do it even if it was done for a ha-ha funny. I mean, it's not, and with an audience that big watching, sheesh. And yeah, I know these days Sonny is problematic herself, but you know what your parents used to say, two wrongs do not make a right. Number 9, Howard Finkel is not treated very nice. At the 2011 Survivor Series, CM Punk beat Alberto Del Rio for the WWE title. Finally, not going to get into the summer of Punk here, but it was a difficult old journey. To try and underline we were finally going with Punk, we got legendary ring announcer Howard Finkel to do the shout-outs. Yeah, it was great. Just go and read about how much Howard gave to the company. Hall of Fame all over the place. This is why it's horrible that many a wrestler have confirmed that yes, management wasn't nice to him at all. Jim Cornette during a shoot interview described it as 24/7 bullying. I mean, there's stories of smashing up his rental car, and do you know the reason for all those tuxedo matches? The powers that be didn't think the Fink was in very good shape, so why not ridicule his body? Apparently he was also fed sardines until he threw up during a backstage interview with the Bushwhackers, as people were pretending pretending they just couldn't get a good take. Even Michael Cole was instructed to take shots at Howard when he said his final goodbye to the audience. He mocked his weight and how emotional he got. It's just not on. Think of the legends today who bawl their eyes out when it's time to step aside. Just let them have their moment, man. I mean, we do have tears for a reason. Number 8, the Dave Meltzer trick. It is amazing how some wrestlers tell us they can't stand the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer and yet read him and then get mad about it. Sometimes live on air. Hulk Hogan famously did this at WCW's World War III pay-per-view when he ripped up a copy of the newsletter while screaming, "Observe this, brother." Some fans must have been baffled. We even got it in NXT when Andre Chase berated a reporter during a fake press conference as he replied to one inquiry with, "Was that a 5-star question?" Even over WrestleMania weekend in 2025, Mickie James took exception to it all. One that really stood out, however, though, was back in the day when maybe crazy promoter Herb Abrams actually had a character based on Meltzer during his UWF show. I mean, they were literally called Little Davey Meltzer, so you can't get that confused. And of course, his role was to be beaten up by Steve Williams, who then threw dirt on him. I'm sure you can work it out. Once again, it's mostly ignoring the fan base because some of these people won't know who you're talking about. They'll just think you've gone nuts, or they'll go and do some research and find out who Meltzer is. And then, hey, maybe they subscribe. I am pretty sure that's not what these people wanted, so I'm just going to say it, my friends. I think they thought it through it all. Number 7, Akeem is a walking joke. I think people forget how obvious and on the nose wrestling wars used to be. It's the same today in other guises, and of course it makes sense. It's not just this industry. If there is a competitor, both sides will fire shots. Well, you don't really need to get too mad about it. It's always happened, and it always will. Jim Crockett Promotions was so popular at one time, they even dared to go head-to-head with the ever-expanding WWF, and as such, they were the focus of Vince McMahon's bullets. He was going to take them down somehow. It's why the Survivor Series was born in 1987 as a way to tell the pay-per-view providers that they could only choose one event, his or Crockett's. If they did go the other way, WrestleMania, which had been a huge success, would no longer be available to them. He wasn't beyond the more silly lanes either, because from October 1989 to October 1990, he did introduce Akeem, a character that deliberately existed to mock Dusty Rhodes. He promoted him as the African Dream as opposed to the American one, and even told him to do the same dance. I mean, I'm not kidding, it was identical. As Dusty also joined the WWF during this period, McMahon got him to wear polka dots to double down on this. And look, fair play to Rhodes, he just took all this stuff on his stride, you couldn't get to him. And really, when you do break it right down, it does serve as a massive compliment, because Dusty was so popular, the WWF felt threatened. At the same time, maybe just look at Rhodes, realize this yourself, and treat him the way he deserved. The dude was a megastar. Number 6, what on earth? Mae Young was a delight. There's a reason we still talk about her today, and it's because, despite being well into her 80s, she took no nonsense during the Attitude Era, and often got involved in angles. I mean, she got thrown through a flipping table. When Bubba Ray Dudley did that too, not only did the fans erupt in shock, but Bubba himself ceased to work. Dude sort of lost his mind, because even he knew he'd gone too far. This was all in good faith, or so it felt like. Sort of changed in 2003, when we get to the Bad Blood pay-per-view. Apparently we went into rib mode, and yep, Eric Bischoff was the recipient. At the show itself, it was Bischoff versus Steve Austin in what I believe was called a redneck triathlon, because of course WWE did that. The Attitude Era was over, we were desperately trying to figure things out. During this, Mae Young did come to the ring and hit Eric with a Bronco Buster, and fine, I get it. When you learn that those sardines were back, and that Young had shoved some down her underwear in order to, well, you know. Once again, I'm sure you can figure it out. And sure, that's not as vicious as some of these, but it does sum up how immature WWE management was. I mean, I'm sure they were cracking up at this like some teenage boys playing Fortnite, but I will go back to my old rule. Go and tell this to someone that doesn't watch wrestling, and then get back to me. The truth is you won't, because you would never dare utter these words. You know what the reaction would be. Number 5, Freddie Joe Floyd. Tracy Smothers was a great act when he got to be Tracy Smothers. Go find many of your favorites talking about this. They all love the guy. Smothers was also famed for working one of the best tag matches ever when the Southern Boys faced the Midnight Express at the 1990 Great American Bash. He also tore up in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and found himself in ECW. He had a mad gimmick there, I tell you. He was sold as a hillbilly from Southern Italy. I mean, why not? It was all going to head to the WWE eventually, and yep, When he got there, they just changed everything. The rumor was he reminded Vince McMahon of WCW head honcho Ted Turner, so he took Tracy and turned him into the most southern stereotype ever. He was told to use the word fixin' over and over, and his theme, well, obviously it was banjo music. You've already seen what we called him too, Freddie Joe Floyd, to try and bite into this even more, and surely that has to be part of the rib. Gerald and Jack Briscoe, who are also from the South and worked for Vince at the time, had the real names of Floyd and Freddie Joe. It of course turned this run into a joke, and Smothers had more than that in the tank. Also meant he was hired to be a punchline. That is so strange, especially because at the time WWE needed stars. But nope, let's just have a little bit of fun instead, at the expense of nobody else but ourselves, and before the arrival of 2.0. So we are never gonna know for sure. But we do have eyes and we do have ears, and yeah, it sure seemed like as soon as NXT bigwig Triple H was out the picture, Vince McMahon and co. totally redid the product. And I mean every aspect. Because if we had dark colors before, now we went neon. If we had a heavy metal logo, now it was pop. If we had a hard rock theme, well, now we had a happy clappy one. It also came down to the fact that we had hardcore indie workers who were moved aside for developmental talent, and we even had Bron Breakker destroy the old NXT logo during an entrance. I mean, talk about a literal response. There's no way the real-life Paul Levesque was behind all this, as he had spent years building the third brand into something very unique. It then became a little bit cookie-cutter, and I suppose you could call this a punishment more than a joke. Vince McMahon had decided, as AEW was still going, the whole idea of NXT on Wednesdays had failed. You know what happens after this too, so yeah. Was really quite uncomfortable to watch. The speed of the switch as well. Wrestling really is a crazy old place. Number 3, The Big Show doesn't like heights. Judgment Day 2003. Big Show versus Brock Lesnar, they had a very fun sports entertainment stretcher match. Of course, there is more to this, because before it all, the real-life Paul White had admitted he was scared of some things, such as clowns and heights. Therefore, during this brawl, Lesnar put the Big Show on said stretcher and raised it in the air courteous of a forklift. Somewhere you just know that Judy Bagwell was freaking out. He goes a legit 15 feet upwards too, and even if this was the plan, you just know it came from when Big Show revealed all of this. It's a stretcher match. Nobody needs to be elevated. There's actually a few of these incidences with the Big Show because he fell afoul of management a lot due to his weight issues. It's why he had to dress up like a baby one year. That was awful. He even squirted some milk into somebody's face. I am sorry. And yeah, sure, maybe Show was game, but I can't believe he enjoyed it. Even more so when he was up there, and that's when it gets bad. You all have fears, you just can't overcome them. There's plenty of people as well that have always said when the WWE team did realize how many times the Big Show had turned heel to face and face to heel, they then doubled that for a bit more ha-ha, and even Freddie Prinze Jr. had a story. As Prinze Jr. talked about on his Podcast with Freddie podcast, sorry about that, this was a rib that Vince McMahon pulled on live TV on the Big Show. The chair Big Show was going to sit in when he was going to read a Santa Claus story, because that's good TV, was going to break when he sat in it. So always keep that in your head, some things are never going to change. Number 2, Gerald Briscoe lends a hand. This one is so awful because yes, we have to talk about Mae Young giving birth to a hand. That also means talking about the relationship between Mae and Mark Henry. I'll give you a headline. It was awful. It turns out when you dive deeper into this one, it may have tied into another joke with Jerry Briscoe, because he was not a big fan of bodily fluids. Jim Ross even tells a story of them being in Vince McMahon's car and him farting like a loon to try and wind him up. The man is insane. This brings us to the night in question, and look, never watch this. There is just all sorts going everywhere, and of course, who had to be present even though he was nothing to do with the angle? Mr. Briscoe. He had to touch a bunch of stuff too, so yeah. There's some evidence if you did need it. A lot of this was the boss just being an asshole. Not a huge surprise. And really, you should be more confused as a fan as to why Gerald was there in the first place. It's just the oddest cameo ever. I would guess McMahon was just hoping he would throw up or something. Thankfully he didn't. No one ever needs that. Gerald himself also was known to rib people, as Kurt Angle told during an interview at the Wrestling Guys store. So when he first joined the WWE, Briscoe went to him and said, listen, I've chatted to Vince McMahon and he thinks you should wear your Olympic gold medals everywhere. When Kurt said, what do you mean everywhere? He was like, literally everywhere, even outside at the airport, everywhere. Angle did ask why he should do this, and of course Jerry told him up straight, we just want everyone to believe in the character. Angle then went on to explain that it became a right issue at the airport because of course you have to take the medals off to go through security before putting them back on again, and that the people behind the counter were like, why is this man so obsessed with his Olympic triumph? Eventually he was backstage at a show when Vince McMahon saw him and actually asked, why are you wearing all those medals? And of course Kurt Angle replied, well, Gerald Briscoe told me that's exactly what you wanted me to do. Of course Vince laughed and said, ha ha ha, you just have to wear them at TV. That's like a different kind of rib. I mean, really, it just feels like a giant waste of time. Number 1, Trip Bradshaw. Let us go back to being a child. You could not do anything. If you slipped, farted, sneezed in a weird way, said a wrong word, that was that. You'd be Slippy Steve, Fred the Farter, Sarah Sneezes, or Wrong Word Jack. I know that last one doesn't have alliteration, but kids are stupid. The point is it can stick with you, and that's the same in wrestling. One false move and you're done. Any happy life you wanted is over. The sad part is that comes from the fact that some humans just never grow out of this and just lap it up. Because JBL was coming to the ring and he slipped over. Fell right on his ass, and I'm sure Vince McMahon thought this was the funniest thing to ever happen since dinosaurs walked on the planet. It wasn't just in this moment though. Days later, when the world had forgotten, a man walked to the ring to take part in 205 Live, and his name was actually Trip Bradshaw. That's right. We didn't even bother to come up with something clever, we just wrote the incident down in a lower third. So while it isn't brutal, it should brutally make you feel upset. This is how low we go with these things. It is quite frankly utterly ridiculous. Of course, Bradshaw was notorious for the amount of ribs he would pull on other people, so you could say this was fair cause. I mean, just go and ask Steve Blackman. Because back on May 23rd, 1999, a bunch of wrestlers had touched down in an airport when for some reason JBL decided to start patting Blackman's rear end. You heard this right. This story comes from Bob Holly's book, which you should absolutely go and read right now. According to the hardcore one, though, it started on an early morning flight when Bradshaw was still a bit drunk and had decided, I'm going to go over to that Steve Blackman and try and wind him up. Now, you couldn't do that to Steve because he was not into this, so said to Bradshaw right to his face, John, the next time you do that, I'm going to knock your f***ing teeth out. Of course, JBL thought he was kidding or just couldn't help himself, so he did it again, when Blackman then decided to try and smack JBL right in the mouth with a backhand before jabbing him in the face. Holly even said that JBL took a few swings but totally missed, allowing Blackman to hit him even more, and eventually, he even tried to kick Bradshaw's knees out. If his leg hadn't got caught on a bag handle, well, let's just say it may have ended differently. Eventually, it was broken up by Holly and Al Snow, with Ron Simmons telling everyone they need to calm down. And because Bradshaw still wanted to fight, Steve then yelled at him, I'm going to f***ing kill you. After tempers had gone out the window, JBL finally thought he should go and apologize to Steve. And do you know what Blackman said to him? No apologies, I am going to finish you later. Thankfully, Holly and Ken Shamrock went to find him and calmed him right down. But can you imagine? I think he was actually going to do it. Do you want to know a criticism that WWE gets a lot? It's too polished, or it's the Disney of wrestling, I believe is the phrase. It's designed to make your mum look at it and go, well, what's this? Then you'll see El Grande Americano duplicate himself and they'll likely get confused. On occasion though, WWE has tried to do things off the cuff and it went not great. Bad, some may say, but it could also be funny. So I am Simon Miller, the bald a-hole, and it is 8 times everything kinda fell in a toilet. Number 8, McMahon's $1 Million Mania. 2008 is when WWE was in a weird place. The Attitude Era was long gone, the Ruthless Aggression Era had pushed the envelope way too far, and we hadn't gone PG yet. As reality TV seemed to be popular, Vince McMahon decided to see if that could be the way for their newfound success. He would dub his version McMahon's $1 Million Mania, where if you tuned into Raw, you could win $1 million. I don't want to be horrible, but that's basically begging. Vince also made actual calls to people who were watching, and of course you can't script this, so sometimes he called the wrong number, often they didn't pick up, he got disconnected, rickrolled, and to be honest with you, it was excruciating TV. On one evening, all of those things I just listed happened during one of these segments. Sometimes it actually felt like Mr. Burns trying to use his telephone, and I really do not get how it would have worked anyway. No one believed it because it's wrestling, it's all lies and nonsense. No one is actually going to win any money, so I won't bother. I would give it to you in headline form. It was a really silly idea. Number 7, LeVar Ball gets way too much creative freedom. Late 2010s didn't sound like a very fun time to be a WWE superstar, as you had to follow the playbook to the letter. This WWE style was very important to the powers that be, and it all felt very cookie cutter. You see wrestlers talk about this today. Forget that brass ring. The backstage atmosphere was very much one of trying not to lose your job. It was also a period where WWE brought in a lot of guest stars, including this episode of Raw. It was 2017, and businessman LeVar Ball must have been told he can do whatever he wanted. Sort of feels like he would have done this anyway, as his sole focus was turning his kids into NBA stars. I mean, it was proper any means necessary. So many people were talking about his actions in the mainstream, though. WWE invited him onto Miz TV. And my gosh, Ball's kids were there, but LeVar quickly took over, speaking louder than The Miz and cracking jokes as if he had been told he'd never be allowed to do this again. Forget that Miz was meant to be getting his feud with Dean Ambrose across. That went right out the window. Lonzo, the child, or the future NBA hopeful, just sat there as his dad took his shirt off when LeVar started swearing. All of this got picked up on a microphone, and eventually Ambrose was sent out to try and save this, and that didn't work at all. I mean, I think he was meant to be aligned with the Big Baller brand. Nobody heard that because there was too much noise. LeVar's language was deemed so offensive the WWE had to make a public apology too, and of course none of this was meant to happen. Ball just saw an opportunity, so he went with it, because what did he care? He also said that Miz stood for Misinterpreted Zone. To this day, I have no idea. The soon-to-be John Moxley must have been really sad about all this too. He'd been asking for more creative freedom for years. Nope. Then here's LeVar cutting a promo like it's 1999. Number 6, the first incarnation of NXT. It is so hard to explain this these days because everybody is so used to NXT as WWE's third proper brand. Well, when it was first born, it was a reality show. The NXT stood for next, as in who is the next big wrestling superstar. We're going to find out using a bunch of challenges and a random obstacle course. I mean, clearly you need to be good at those things to become a wrestler. This also included wheelbarrow races, test of strengths, and of course the forever popular promo battle out of nowhere. The contestants would be given a mundane object and had to talk about it as if they were about to fight it on pay-per-view. I mean, only then can we truly know who the next John Cena should be. Now, if you have ever tried this at home or in your car, you know the first few goes are awful. Takes a while to find your voice. Now imagine that times 10, because these guys were doing it in front of thousands of people. Poor Eli Cottonwood got the worst of this as he was given the word moustache, and yes, he chose to say only a real fighter has such facial hair, and even though he wasn't currently sporting a moustache, damn it, that's gonna change soon. I actually find this hysterical these days, but yes, the fans ate him alive. It actually sounded like he wasn't sure if he had a moustache or not. Question was why WWE chose to put this on TV, and I can tell you, my friends, it's all in the name of humiliation. Let's not pretend otherwise. This is what WWE thought would increase their ratings, and it didn't. And instead, potential stars quit because why bother with this? It was a losing battle. Number 5, the Charlotte Flair-Becky Lynch title swap. This is quite infamous now, because not only have both Charlotte and Becky spoken about it, but it also told the wider audience that the former best friends, well, maybe now they've had a falling out. It was the October 22, 2001 SmackDown, and WWE was still doing that dumb thing where they'd have a brand split, and for shock reasons, they would move the champions around. Of course, you can't possibly have the Raw Women's belt on a blue brand, so Lynch and Flair were told to switch their gold on the show. Then General Manager Sonya Deville would make sure all this went smoothly, and it did not. Apparently Charlotte was worried she was going to look stupid, so when she went to pass her title across, she deliberately dropped it on the floor. Now go and look at Becky's face during this. She was so angry because that's not what had been discussed. To save face, both were going to trade the same way, so it didn't really feel like anybody had won the segment. Flair's reasoning was she wanted Lynch to pick it up, which would be demeaning in some way, but of course Sonya did it instead. And honestly, it kind of felt like Becky and Charlotte were going to fight. Apparently backstage they verbally did, they had a huge bust-up. So basically we had seen their rift get worse in the ring on live TV. That's mad, and because at first we thought this was the plan, it was widely lambasted. It was just so awkward and weird. Why would anybody book it this way? Well, we didn't. It was just nightmarish. But because I do have a chaotic side like Dr. Robotnik, it was also quite funny. Number 4, Kalisto does lucha things. It hurts me deep inside that WWE did not run with this. Kalisto may have flubbed his lines in 2016 after he was drafted back to SmackDown, and it all happened in the post-move interview. I'm not sure whether he was unprepared or was just too pumped, but after rambling on, he just blurted out, "It's all about good lucha things." Then he ran off. Literally, he bolted off camera. Now some people say this is hard to watch, but my friends, I disagree. If nothing else, it was the realest anybody had been on TV in ages, and the internet went mad about this. It was just so funny, and WWE should have made him Lucha Things Kalisto the next week. Instead, it was buried And I would have bought a t-shirt at the very least. Of course, it was improvised though, and actually may have hurt the rest of the roster, because if you had been pushing for more unscripted interview opportunities, and then somebody in charge saw this, well, it makes it harder. It was so entertaining though. It kind of feels like we did drop the ball. Go good lucha things. Number 3, Shane McMahon versus The Miz at WrestleMania 39. So the big surprise at WrestleMania 39 is that when The Miz and Snoop Dogg were shouting at each other, which is a very strange sentence, Shane McMahon was going to make his big return and beat up The Miz. He then did a leapfrog, and when he landed on his leg, he pulled his quad. This was so similar to Vince McMahon at the Royal Rumble, nobody could believe it. I mean, talk about bad luck. Now, what followed is some of the greatest improvisation that's ever actually happened in WWE. We all remember this. Snoop Dogg became Bruno Sammartino or something, and basically ad-libbed his way to beating The Miz and even dropped a people's elbow. It should be given 6.25 stars in the Tokyo Dome. I actually want to reverse this though and go back to that Shane McMahon thing because it is glossed over so fast today. I know he was somewhat of a controversial figure, but can you imagine making your big return at WrestleMania and doing something as simple as a leapfrog when you did all of a sudden come back down to earth and poop, your muscle goes, not today, brother, and you just have to lay on the floor and kind of wriggle around like a worm. I was there and I had no idea what was going on, and it just made you feel so uncomfortable in your tum-tum, especially when you realized what was up. I always like to focus on the human side, and you don't want anybody to go through this sort of pain, especially because Shane McMahon's kids were there too. They were probably worried about their dad. You do have to give all the props to Snoop Dogg though, because again, you could throw him in there with John Cena and they would probably totally smash it. But in terms of a segment going from part 1 to the end, well yeah, it's absolutely something you do not want to happen on WrestleMania. Number 2, Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton go off. This one was chatted about on WWE Unreal, so I guess we should take it with a pinch of salt. That show only wanted you to see what WWE wanted you to see. At the same time, you can't fake authentic reactions, and we think Charlotte was not happy with any of this. It was the SmackDown leading up to WrestleMania 41 where Flair and Stratton would compete for the women's title, and our next stop on the journey was Chicago. They decided they really didn't like Charlotte Flair though, and they booed her viciously, and it clearly rocked the Queen. You could hear it in her voice. Tiffany then joined as per usual, and I think because Flair was desperate to get her footing back, she started improvising. Also said that Tiffany Stratton was talking too squeaky and eventually just gave up. She said, "There's 2, you in Chicago, let's just get it done." She most definitely wasn't happy. Flair then still continued to interrupt Tiffany, and I suppose by that point Stratton decided it was an all gloves off situation because she told Charlotte she wasn't the queen of shit and also asked, "How many divorces have you had?" Stratton then legged it, I think she knew. We've all seen the footage too, and yeah, Tiffany is ordered to apologise because she had gone off script, and you shouldn't take shots like that. It was so bizarre this all played out on TV, but it also kind of worked. I had no idea what was real and what was wrestling, and that sort of tied into their Mania match too. Felt like they were actually scrapping. And I know it kind of drew a line down the middle of the audience, but this bald idiot thought it was great. Number 1, CM Punk and Drew McIntyre go off. So worst is unfair here unless we are going to throw it into the context of stomach churning. And I mean that in a good way. Like when you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, you cannot believe what's happening. We all remember that CM Punk and Drew McIntyre had a forever feud in 2024, however, which helped both their careers, and a huge reason for the success was their promos. I don't think they were told what to do or say, just make some money, and my gosh they did. We go to the March 25th Raw here that actually featured Seth Rollins too, but before the Visionary had come to the ring, Punk was yelling at Drew, who was sat on the announce table. After McIntyre reminded Punk he was once the chosen one, CM Punk simply asked, well, who chose you? Who was this paragon of virtue that has bestowed such an honor on your shoulders? And the crowd went very quiet because they knew the answer was Vince McMahon. Now, given the lawsuit hanging over McMahon's head, nobody was allowed to talk about him on television, and just you look at Drew's face. He's going through all the emotions, including contemplating whether he should respond. He decided against it, right choice. It is fascinating TV though, because it is real. If the characters of CM Punk and Drew McIntyre were having a proper argument, of course you'd say this. Nearly everything they did was so compelling because they improvised it and knew what they were doing. It's not like it derailed things either. Fans lost their minds for it afterwards, and it was soon granted the feud of the year. Not granted crowd, that's what I meant to say, but it goes to show sometimes you do have to trust the talent, and they would take that bat and they will smash it out the park.
Professional wrestling is basically the Wild West, which is both its biggest strength and its biggest weakness. Many a wrestler has said something truly shocking, hilarious, or downright terrifying when given a live microphone, and sometimes all of that happens at once. From mind-blowing one-liners to full-blown monologues that got them in trouble with audiences and networks alike on live television. But before we begin, a quick content warning for this one. Some of these moments involve very sensitive subject matter indeed. I'm obviously going to filter my language appropriately, but there is a bunch of really nasty stuff here. And also, this is a collection rather than a ranked list because, yeah, how do you rank some of this stuff? I'm Andy from WhatCulture Wrestling, and these are the 30 most insane things wrestlers have ever said. Anyway, number 30, New Jack's prison story. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't think of a better place to start with a list like this than with New Jack, one of the all-time great pro wrestling madmen. Returning to the ECW arena for Big Ass Extreme Bash on the 9th of March 1996, Jack had some things to get off his chest. Explaining the background of his shocking return in New York one night earlier, he said he'd been sitting in a jail cell in Atlanta for 5 weeks, thinking he could be in the ring beating the F out of somebody, but instead he was stuck inside watching BS WCW, and of course he didn't say BS, he said the swear words. New Jack said, and I quote, "I jacked off that night. Hard," which is that's a little bit too much information there, pal. New Jack continued, saying, "F Eric Bischoff, F Vince McMahon, because none of them are ECW, which might not be where the big boys play, but is definitely where the real mother effers get down." Later in the show, he recalled telling Jim Cornette to, and I quote, "suck on his nuts." Then he explained that he'd been in jail for aggravated assault and kidnapping, for putting somebody who owed him money in the back of his car, driving him around Atlanta for 8 hours, forgetting he was there, and then only being reminded when the cops came around to knock on his door. I mean, would you want to wrestle this man? Number 29, Vince McMahon bullies Jim Ross. Good old Dr. Heine. Vince McMahon's control issues were legendary. Paul Heyman once claimed that Vince saw sneezing as a sign of weakness because he couldn't control it. That same unhinged thinking was on full display in 2005 when McMahon turned Jim Ross's real-life colon surgery into a 7-minute comedy skit. Instead of basic human decency, WWE gave us fart noises, sex jokes, and slapstick nonsense, with Vince McMahon playing doctor, literally pulling objects out of a fake JR's backside. It was tasteless, embarrassing, and not even original. WWE had done a nearly identical and equally awful version of the skit with Hurricane and Triple H years earlier. Even if you want to make excuses and call it a backstage rib between longtime colleagues, it was never funny in the first place. Not when it started, not when it dragged on, and definitely not when the punchline turned out to be Ross's own severed head. "I'm Dr. Heine," Vince McMahon said, opening the skit, "and I want you to meet Nurse Slobberknockers," before uttering the most nauseating yeah you'll ever hear. Number 28, Dustin Rhodes buries his new gimmick on day one. In 1999, Dustin Rhodes left WWE for WCW, believing the grasser to be greener on the other side after growing tired and frustrated with playing Goldust. You can imagine his dismay then when he was immediately slapped with an extremely cartoonish gimmick that, in the vignettes, appeared to cast his character, Seven, as a child catcher? Permitted to kill the gimmick dead despite the initial outlay, Dustin, in his very first appearance as Seven, tore it to shreds, explaining that he'd left WWE for gimmicks like this and he only wanted to be himself in WCW. Dustin continued. He said, "But the powers that be came to me and said, Dustin sucks, Dustin is boring, so I'm here now, I stand before you. Oh, my new name is Seven, by the way. They've dressed me up like Uncle Fester to play trick or treat all year long. Powers that be, what you can do is take Goldust and shove it up your ass. You can take this silly looking thing, Seven, and shove it up your ass." Burying the gimmick on night one? Yep. That'll do it. Number 27, Enzo Amore buries entire rosters. Enzo Amore became a persona non grata in WWE by the time of his 2018 dismissal, but at one point he was so good on the microphone that he was deemed the answer to a self-made problem, that being saving the cruiserweight division. Enzo did this not by being a great cruiserweight wrestler, but basically by killing every single person in the division on the microphone with a single line. Here's a sample of what he said about his peers. phony niece. You've got more abs than you do brain cells, you schmuck. Gnome Dar? Gnome Dar? Same goes for Garden Gnome. I'll kick you across the lawn. Jack Gallagher. What's up, teacup? You dress like a 1930s paperboy. Brian Kendrick. You look like a hobo. You'd make more money sitting outside the arena begging for change than you would stepping in the ring because I got 0 dimes for you. In response, the victims of the verbals equally infamously did absolutely nothing. Good! Number 26. Tater Tots. Roman Reigns had endured bad WWE booking for over a year when he fired off the most awkward comeback yet against WWE champion Sheamus following the Irishman's win and successful cash-in at Survivor Series 2015. And he repeated it again and again and again, sneering as he delivered the groin-related insult Tater Tots. Reigns' confidence grew disproportionately as he desperately tried to get the audience to latch on to the really lame phrase. They, of course, did not do that, making for a deafening silence as he persevered down another wretched path. Wasn't quite on suffering succotash levels, but it was real bad. This was yet another example of WWE's failed attempt at fan manipulation when it came to the big dog. This line was supposed to be a one-time quip designed to spark a crowd chant of Tater Tots, Tater Tots, but for the second time that year, it became painfully obvious that Roman Reigns was no Rock. While the Great One could make garbage phrases like Kung Pao Bitch, Boots to Asses, and Cookie Puss work, Reigns needed to endure another 5 years of creative hell before finding wrestling nirvana. Number 5. Jeremy Piven makes a bad time even worse. The old adage around promos used to be that you had to hit all the details of what you were actually promoting: the opponent, the venue, the date, and in modern times, the name of the show. Enter Jeremy Piven, aka Entourage's Ari Gold, and the cursed time known as Raw's guest host era. Most of the special celebrity guests that turned up on Raw between 2009 and 2010 had little to no understanding of WWE's product, yet they were granted excessive screen time in segments they were almost always the weakest part of. Piven's now infamous Summerfest blunder was embarrassing, but no more so than the rest of his painfully awkward performance on the August 3rd, 2009 episode of Raw, which included a disastrous partnership with Ken Jeong that only made matters worse. What was once the biggest pay-per-view of the summer was now Summerfest, reduced to an unforgettable mess-up. Thankfully, WWE has evolved beyond this dark period, although one too many cuts towards famous faces in the crowd during the Netflix era has already been a grim flashback to this wretched time. Number 24, Dumb and Dumber, starring Braun Strowman and Shane McMahon. Watching over a year of WWE pandemic wrestling may be more of a sign of insanity than anything else on this list, but it never got more insane than when Shane McMahon appeared to lose control of his body and brain during a promo exchange, quote unquote, with Braun Strowman that went beyond bizarre and into nut of this earth. Attempting to heat up their lame duck WrestleMania 37 program, McMahon made a mess for the ages with an elongated, overly exhausted recital of mangled garbage, punctuated by very heavy breathing and attempts to right himself, having blatantly forgotten any/all of his material. McMahon just talked and talked and talked until some words, lots of them irrelevant, came out of his mouth. It was an overlong ramble, the likes of which make Chewbacca sound coherent, and revolved around Shane calling Braun stupid by saying that he'd heard a bunch of people call Braun stupid, but he would never say that himself, even though he just did. But Braun, hear me out on one thing, said Shane, signing off. Again, I have never, would I never, specifically call you stupid, would I? Braun? A confusing and depressing disaster, Shane had made the story totally unsalvageable, save for the inevitably insane back bump that he took in their cage match blow-off. Number 23, Scott Steiner scorches the earth underneath his feet. Scott Steiner's reputation as a no-nonsense, unhinged powerhouse was well established before swapping his mullet for a bleached buzz cut, but it wasn't until his reinvention in 1998 that fans got to see the full extent of his unfiltered rage. By 2000, WCW was in complete freefall, but Steiner was thriving in the midst of a major push. His fury reached new heights on the 7th of February episode of Nitro when he turned his wrath on Ric Flair in a verbal annihilation that took the entire company down with the Nature Boy. Unleashing a blistering tirade, Steiner blurred the lines between storyline and reality. He mocked Flair as, and I quote, a 53-year-old man with more loose skin than a Shar-Pei puppy, and then took aim at his extravagant lifestyle, suggesting that instead of spending money in limousines and Learjets, you should have fixed your crooked yellow teeth. In a moment of stunning candor, Scott outright buried WCW on their own live broadcast as well. He ranted about fans switching over to see Stone Cold Steve Austin instead, then delivered a fatal blow, calling 16-time world champion Ric Flair an ass-kissing, butt-sucking bastard who belonged in WCW because WCW sucks. Amazingly, Steiner faced zero consequences for this. Number 22. The Codyverse Coda. The 19th of January 2022 episode of AEW Dynamite was something of a course correction, one designed to address the barrage of complaints following the previous week's disastrous episode. The solution was swift and effective. A more streamlined show delivered relatively clean finishes, logical storyline progression, and reinvigorated feuds. Apart from whatever the hell was going on in the Codyverse, that is. Cody Rhodes launched into a rambling promo that somehow touched on WWE, NXT, The Elite, Jay Lethal, Ricky Starks, FTR, Red Dragon, Brody King, and despite saying he'd been told not to, CM Punk. Only after all of that did he get round to addressing his actual opponent, Sammy Guevara. And even then, that was only for 2 minutes that nobody remembered because of every other shot he'd fired in the promo.
That was a shock, I didn't see that coming.
Shifting between shoot and work, babyface and heel, Cody's delivery was as captivating as it was completely absurd. But fans in AEW had grown so tired of him by this point that they didn't know where they were at with the American Nightmare in any sense, and the only reactions came from increasingly incendiary lines. Number 21. CM Punk shoots on one of his own, instantly regrets it. CM Punk was relying on the support of his Chicago faithful on the All Out 2022 Go Home Dynamite, and that required him to look credible when a single heckler took him out of his game and out of the Windy City's good books at the same time. Recapping his recent foot injury, Punk talked about pulverizing the bones in his foot and getting 16 screws and 3 plates put in to fix it. So far, so fine, until he heard a lone heckle that sounded an awful lot like the words Colt and Cabana. Punk's response? Well, he said, which real quick is 16 more times than this fat guy has ever gotten screwed in his life, trying to shut down the heckler. This is, of course, somewhat less inflammatory than the things he said after All Out, of course, but we're gonna leave that one alone for this video. Number 20. Hulk Hogan buries his own belt. By constantly feeding Hulk Hogan's ego in 1993, Vince McMahon orchestrated one of the most deflating moments in WrestleMania history by allowing the Hulkster to swoop in and pin new WWE champion Yokozuna seconds after a controversial win over Bret Hart. Had the fans seen what Hogan would end up doing with the title in Japan later on, they would have been even more furious. Less than a month after his power play, Hulk wrestled the Great Muta and completely disrespected the WWE Championship in a clear attempt to cozy up to new paymasters in New Japan and position himself for an IWGP heavyweight title run. In a pre-match promo, Terrible Terry dismissed the Winged Eagle as a mere stepping stone. He doubled down in a post-match press conference, calling the prestigious belt nothing more than a toy and a trinket or ornament on a Christmas tree. Naturally, Hogan didn't have to atone to anyone beyond a single job to give the gold back in June, and he didn't end up making a live TV appearance between his title win and the loss to Yokozuna. Number 19. Stephanie McMahon shoots on Charlotte Flair. In 2016, Charlotte Flair was truly coming into her own, delivering a string of thrilling in-ring performances while serving as the face of WWE's newly revived Women's Championship. Her partnership with Father Rick initially added to the act, with the Nature Boy stationed at ringside to solidify Charlotte's status as a dominant force.
Wings!
But as Charlotte's reign progressed, cutting ties with Dad was the next logical step in establishing Charlotte as a ruthless heel. What she didn't anticipate was being humiliated by the most ruthless figure in company history, Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie took center stage in a Raw backstage segment, tearing the Queen to pieces simply because she could. With no provocation whatsoever, Steph labeled Charlotte a spoiled, selfish, self-important brat and ordered her to step back and shut her mouth without even allowing a response. There was no logic to Stephanie's outrage, no history, no rivalry, and no match to build towards. The entire moment existed for only one reason: to remind Charlotte Flair and everybody else watching who really held the power in WWE. Number 18, Vince McMahon threatens to give his son an effing beating. Cast your minds back to the 22nd of February 2016 Monday Night Raw opening segment. Vince McMahon found his WrestleMania 2 card savaged by a roster ravaged by injuries, which hit just about everybody on his top slate, and there was an alarmingly small number of major matches lined up for a card that he was trying to fill a stadium with. Vince's solution was one that his character had to pretend to despise. A returning Shane McMahon skipped onto the stage back from 7 years in the wrestling wilderness and all the way into a Hell in a Cell bout with The Undertaker. This ended up being an unlikely ticket seller for WrestleMania. It kind of saved the event in a lot of ways, even though Shane's return to screens would harness more bad than good over the long term. What happened to that lockbox, mate? Where is it? What was in there? We'll never know. Vince knew this, and he captured the future frustrations of his audience with one jaw-dropping line. He said, "I have one last opportunity to give you a fucking beating." Vince never took that opportunity, though he did fire Shane after Royal Rumble 2022, just before he resigned in disgrace for the first time later that year. Number 17, Michael Cole and Josh Matthews NXT Season 3 commentary. In general, time has been rather unkind to Michael Cole and Josh Matthews' yuck commentary over the cursed NXT Season 3, and good, because they were horrifically unkind to a roster of women who were just trying to get over. When it became clear that WWE were prepared to let the show die on its ass, smug know-it-alls Cole and Matthews went about heaping even more dirt on it, and anyone who all but dared to take this thing seriously. An anti-promotion within a promotion, NXT at the time seemed designed to do the opposite of get its women over, and the commentators were only too happy to contribute to the appalling vibe. It seems crazy now, given what NXT has evolved into, but lines like "the season can't end early enough" and many worse were said multiple times every single week, from impossibly early into the show's run as well, as was a bizarre running feature that had Cole mocking Matthews for his real-life divorce. Seedy little men with their seedy little jokes in a boys' club overseen by the worst possible man to place in charge. Number 16, Roddy Piper blames Vince Russo for Owen Hart's death. Classic Vince Russo insanity unfolded when Roddy Piper stormed into the early days of TNA, delivering a work-shoot promo that spiraled completely off the rails. Early TNA often trotted out old legends, handing them live microphones to work through their post-WCW trauma, but Piper's segment was on another level. Roddy first used this appearance to shamelessly plug his website and his book, which is fair enough, before turning his fury towards Russo. At first, it played like a standard burial of Russo's on-screen character, but it quickly became bitingly awkwardly personal. Piper viciously tore into the controversial writer, sneering that TNA was the last place Russo hadn't killed. And then things got dark. Suggesting that Russo had deliberately sabotaged young wrestlers' careers, Piper suddenly dropped a shocking line. "Did you write in my cousin Owen Hart's death?" The audience fell silent, as they should have, and the segment veered into infamy. Predictably, it led nowhere. No match, no real feud, just another week where early TNA looked like a chaotic wasteland, before moving on in search of the next ranting icon. Number 15, Divas are dissed. The 2004 Diva search was little more than an excuse for Vince McMahon and his equally repulsive lackey John Laurinaitis to degrade women for their perverse amusement. Under the guise of a reality TV competition, the remaining contestants were actively encouraged to humiliate each other, all for the pleasure of lecherous old men running the show. And just like most of these rigged contests, several of the losers were given jobs anyway. Everybody that had to involve themselves in a Diss the Diva promo battle earned every check they ever cashed. This train wreck of a segment ensured that phrases like "a gap so wide you could drive a truck through it," and worse, much worse, that I won't repeat, were immortalized in Raw history. And as if that wasn't enough to showcase WWE's utter contempt for women, this shit show immediately cut to Kane forcibly dragging Lita down a corridor as part of their ongoing abuse storyline. It's grim stuff, and we should probably delete it from history. Number 14, Ric Flair takes it way too far. Ric Flair's October 4th, 2004 Raw promo on Randy Orton was meant to be a routine legend versus protege speech, but instead it became one of the most shockingly offensive moments in an era where WWE made shockingly offensive their house style. In the midst of his tirade against the supposedly virginal Orton, the Nature Boy blurted out the line, "You know how many virgins I've made holler, scream, and and bleed? The crowd reaction was a mix of gasps and uncomfortable silence, as Flair failed to realize the horrifying implications of what he'd just said. The line was deemed so appalling that WWE immediately cut it from future airings. Backstage, there was significant fallout as well, as higher-ups were furious over Rick's off-the-cuff remark. While Flair wasn't publicly disciplined, it had been reported that he was strongly reprimanded and warned to keep his promos closer to the boundaries of good taste moving forward. Number 13. Kurt Angle, Bestiality. Kurt Angle, during his time in WWE, delivered some of the company's most memorable promos, but one disturbing line from 2005 stands out as the most infamous verbal misstep of his career. In the midst of a deeply uncomfortable storyline where he famously, openly fantasized about sexually assaulting Booker T's wife Sharmell, Angle cut a promo that took an even darker turn. Mid-rant, the Olympic gold medal winner declared his vice for, and I quote, gutter sluts, before shockingly admitting that he dreamed of having perverted sex, bestiality sex, with Sharmell. Obviously, Kurt did not understand the meaning of the word bestiality. Either way, even if he just misspoke, the damage was done. Even the lesser of the two meanings was still utterly vile, raising serious questions about why WWE thought it necessary to frame a legitimate wrestling icon as a deranged predator in the first place. Number 12. Screwed her brains out. Some WWE storylines push boundaries, but few plumb to the depths of depravity quite like the Katie Vick fiasco of October 2002. Over the course of 3 weeks, Triple H unleashed a grotesque smear campaign against Kane, accusing the Big Red Machine of murdering a woman named Katie Vick, then alleging that he had sex with the corpse. WWE didn't stop there. In one of the most infamous segments of all time, Hunter as Kane was shown in a funeral home, simulating necrophilia with a mannequin in a casket before gleefully declaring that he'd screwed her brains out. Despite unifying the titles at No Mercy, Triple H's victory was an afterthought. The match was completely irrelevant. WWE had already cemented this storyline as one of the darkest, most regrettable chapters in wrestling history. Number 11. Vince McMahon calls Triple H a sex offender. Look, there's not much more to this one, other than Vince McMahon all too enthusiastically screaming to Triple H, his future son-in-law by the way, "Come out here, you R-A-P-I-S-T. Obviously, he didn't spell the word, he said it, but you know, there you go. All of this was following the game's insinuation that he'd consummated the marriage between himself and Stephanie that he'd ventriloquismed his way to securing in Las Vegas. Yeah guys, 1999 WWE really doesn't hold up. What also doesn't hold up is this line itself, which became one of many sticks to beat McMahon with when the Netflix documentary makers came around looking for clips that proved him to be a hypocrite many years later. Naturally, they probably could have thrown a dart at any of the reels containing thousands of hours of this horseshit, and they'd have probably found just as much, but this was an absolute doozy. Yeah, he called his son-in-law the R word. Jesus. Number 10. Stephanie McMahon's post-9/11 message. Only a McMahon could twist one of the worst terrorist attacks and human atrocities in modern history into a sob story about being a McMahon. The poor privileged rich people, poor them, it's really all about their struggle, you know. WWE's September 13th, 2001 episode of SmackDown opened with an uncharacteristically restrained speech from Vince McMahon. His words seemed at the very least on trend with the dual sense of national unity and mourning. Later on, though, Stephanie took her turn. What followed was repugnant and insane. She stared right through the shaken audience and compared the 9/11 terrorists to the US government because they had dared to prosecute Vince during the 1994 steroid trial. Oh, boo-hoo, goo-goo gaga. Yes, in Stephanie's mind, the federal investigators were on the same level as the hijackers that had murdered tens of thousands of innocent people. Any messages of solidarity or sympathy were swallowed up by a tribalistic adoration of the company and her minted family. Worse still is that this wasn't a live off-the-cuff blunder. Like most of the speeches on the show that night, this was a pre-taped vignette, meaning that it had to pass through multiple layers of production before making it to air. And at no point, not one of these people in WWE questioned the sheer lunacy of the whole thing. Number 9. Mr. White, that's not wise. In yet another instance of WWE's misguided attempts at comedy, the infamous Tim White suicide skits somehow began as a serious segment before spiraling into one of the most shockingly tasteless storylines in company history. The former referee, who had supposedly been forced into retirement due to a shoulder injury suffered during a Hell in a Cell match. With the wrestling industry still reeling from addiction and mental health struggles, particularly following Eddie Guerrero's real-life passing just 1 month earlier, WWE had Tim attempt suicide on screen, pulling the trigger of a shotgun off camera. The twist was that he missed and only shot himself in the foot, making him the probably worst aim of all time. But rather than do the decent thing and drop the angle, WWE doubled down with a series of absurd comedy skits that, over the coming weeks, saw White repeatedly try to kill himself in increasingly ridiculous ways. This included, but wasn't limited to, ingesting rat poison, drowning in a fish tank, electrocuting himself in a bathtub, suffocation, hanging, gassing, and even hiring a hitman. A panicked Josh Matthews remained at the scene every single time, always there to punctuate the pantomime with the line, "Mr. White, that's not wise," as if to imply that any of this had been before they started rolling. Number 8. Vince McMahon's threat to Paul Heyman. Vince McMahon staunchly defended WWE against moral watchdogs for years, using various defense lines about what they would and wouldn't use, despite increasingly chaotic and controversial storylines. Guns and knives, in particular, were considered no-nos, even if it felt as though the company had been tiptoeing each and every line it set for itself over the years. In 2003, Vince managed to leap clean over one of those lines, hitting all of the flashpoints in a single promo as if he was actively trying to contradict himself. Locked in a feud with The Undertaker, McMahon demanded that new SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman summon the dead man to the show. When Heyman informed Vince that The Undertaker was not going to appear until Survivor Series, Vince flew into an unhinged rage and unleashed one of the ugliest diatribes of his career. McMahon ranted that terrorists were going to burn down The Undertaker's house, and he said that his children were going to be kidnapped. And then he said some stuff about The Undertaker's wife that I'm just not going to repeat, because it's that nasty. After all of this, Vince turned his unflinching fury on Heyman himself, threatening to strangle him to death before firing him. So you're gonna kill him and then fire him. That's a pretty strange sequence of events. The segment was never referenced again, nor has it found its way onto any of WWE's nostalgic highlight reels, and for good reason. Number 7. Jinder Mahal becomes racist. Jinder Mahal's run as WWE champion in 2017 was already a struggle before his feud with Shinsuke Nakamura, which somehow made it even worse. Instead of crafting a compelling rivalry, WWE resorted to tired racist tropes, having Mahal repeatedly mock Nakamura for his appearance and his accent in segments that felt both outdated and needlessly defensive. "You always look the same" was a line that Jinder uttered, pronounced in such a way that was intended to mock a Japanese dialect. The problem wasn't just that Jinder was being used as a cheap heat magnet, it was that the entire angle hinged on barely coded hate speech rather than any meaningful conflict. Fans weren't booing because they wanted to see Nakamura beat Jinder's ass, they were groaning because the whole thing felt uncomfortable. There was no real sense of good triumphing over evil here. Instead, we had two performers trapped in a feud that felt more like a corporate obligation than a battle for the industry's richest prize. And also, I want to say, poor Jinder. He was the one made to recite these lines. Yeah, no word on how much he pushed back on them or whatever, but they weren't his own. He had these forced on him by just dumbass writers. Poor guy. Number 6. Triple H is even more racist. The Triple H versus Booker T feud heading into WrestleMania 19 has been dissected and condemned for years, and for good reason. Not only was it built on racially charged promos that have no place in society, but it also delivered an ending that essentially vindicated the hate speech used to fuel the feud. Booker T was finally rising back through the ranks as a fan favorite on Raw in early 2003. But when he challenged Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship, the game made it clear that he did not see Booker as a worthy contender. And not just as a competitor, but as a person. In one of the most infamous promos in WWE history, Triple H sneered, and I quote, "People like you don't get to be world champion." Years later, this was spun as being a reference to his WCW resume, and if you believe that, I've got a unicorn I would like to sell you. And usually the people who repeat that line of defense prove themselves just as tone deaf as the people who were crafting this idea in the first place. The most egregious moment between these two came when Booker confronted Hunter in a bathroom the following week. Instead of selling a bit of concern for the peril that he was theoretically in, Triple H casually threw money in the challenger's face and asked him to fetch him a towel. It was outright discriminatory, played as just another heel move, and it was infuriatingly brushed aside. Number 5. Jerry Lawler goes low with Goldust. Jerry Lawler's venomous promo aimed at Goldust ahead of their King of the Ring 97 qualifier remains one of the most scathing and uncomfortable segments in WWE history. As Lawler looked down the lens, his seething disdain pierced through the screen and into the souls of the audience, and he delivered a tirade so blisteringly offensive it's painful to revisit. Opening with a derogatory jab, Lawler referred to Goldust as, and I quote, our sissy friend, immediately setting the tone for a promo that would rapidly escalate into deeply ugly territory. He then went from insult to outright slur with a line that feels even more disgusting when viewed through the lens of today than it did back in 1997. Going further, Lawler targeted Goldust's real-life wife, Terry Runnels, calling her the biggest gold digger in Georgia, before cruelly referencing the company's daughter Dakota, saying she could have been called Target because I heard everybody in Atlanta had a shot at it. Jerry Lawler was never one for good taste, and here you go, here's the worst of him. Number 4. Vince McMahon makes Trish Stratus bark like a dog, and he also made her cry, and he made her apologize for things he told her to do, and he made her get down on her knees, and he made her strip, and he made her stop, and then he made her leave. With everything we now know about the allegations of sex trafficking and abuse against Vince McMahon and WWE, moments like his degrading treatment of Trish Stratus on WWE television take on an even more disturbing weight. At the time, it was seen as just another example of Vince's unchecked ego running wild in really misogynistic ways. This was it at perhaps its most egregious at the time, but it was still just another example. It was tasteless, exploitative, and utterly unnecessary. Yet McMahon likely justified it as a way to generate heat for his eventual comeuppance at WrestleMania X7. In hindsight, it's not hard to see this as another glimpse into a man who, off-screen, allegedly manipulated and controlled women in far worse ways. What was once written off as just a storyline now looks far more like a reflection of an abuse of power that extended well beyond WWE's scripted world. Number 3. Vince McMahon uses the N-word. Vince McMahon did this, speaking backstage to John Cena at Survivor Series 2005 in a glowing endorsement of his babyface top star, and in service of a visual gag with Booker T in the seconds that followed. Vince McMahon did this. In the grand scheme of things, it might get lost when reviewing some of the things Vince did without even remotely caring about the people who could have been impacted as a result, but he did it, flippant reduction and all. It was a second that may as well have lasted a lifetime, and thanks to the internet, it will be available no matter how much cutting and clipping goes on at Netflix or on the WWE Vault YouTube channel. And 8 years earlier, with seemingly even more twisted motivation, Vince took his time shaming himself, WWE, and his entire organization in front of his own cameras. Number 2. Vince McMahon grills a grieving widow. One of WWE's darkest days became yet another stage for Vince McMahon's ruthless exploitation as he callously used a grieving widow for a live television let-off just 24 hours after her husband's death. Just before Bad Blood in Your House had gone live, a somber McMahon informed the audience that Brian Pillman had tragically passed away earlier that day. The pay-per-view proceeded, handling the tragedy with a sort of quiet dignity for the era, and it was a sentiment that carried over onto the following night's episode of Raw with a traditional 10-bell salute. Then everything turned utterly impossibly grotesque. McMahon announced that Brian Pillman's wife, Melanie, would be interviewed live later in the broadcast. With a cold detachment, Vince forced a grieving mother to process her unimaginable loss on air. Melanie, understandably in shock, struggled to form coherent responses as Vince pried into how she would cope financially and how the children had reacted to their father's death. Hard close-ups captured every single tear, offering viewers an unfiltered, harrowing look at real grief, and all for the semantic bailouts and cheap ratings. To make it even more appalling, WWE shamelessly promoted the interview throughout the show as if it was some kind of must-see segment. It was pro wrestling viewer bait at its most vile, and we should never let the company forget that. And at number 1, New Jack shouts out OJ. Look, what better place to wrap this one up than the very place we started. Hello again, New Jack. Let's travel back to Smoky Mountain Wrestling at a TV taping in July 1994. While WWE were promoting a match featuring Undertaker versus Undertaker, and the entire world looked on at a story much bigger than all of sports and entertainment anyway, New Jack was ready to fight the entire world when, look, I'll just read the line to you. I would like to send a special shout out to my homeboy, OJ Simpson. Keep up the good work, baby. 2 less we got to worry about, you understand? Keep up the good work. Obviously, his delivery was a little different to mine, but even looking back, today, 31 years later, it's hard to believe. Ready to end on a flourish and make explicit what might have been simply implied to the Warrensville, North Carolina natives at the time, Jack went wildly up the gears in the only way he could. Jaws were left unhinged and or on the floor long after the words left Jack's mouth, but he was unflinching and unmoved. He didn't give a damn. For the rest of his controversial life in wrestling and everything else that followed, he truly lived the gimmick.
No one knows more about ups and downs than me. I've very much made a living out of it, and I think the reason people understand is down to the fact that it's all something we have to go through. Sometimes you're smashing it, and sometimes you're in the toilet. There's usually a catalyst to such a switch too, and incredibly when it comes to wrestling, this often happens on camera. What a world, eh? So I am Simon from WhatCulture. Please do hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. And this is 10 wrestling career turning points that took place on air. Number 10, the 1-2-3 Kid. Everyone knew Sean Waltman was the man the second they saw him in the ring. There's a reason he soon became the go-to guy with management to see what young up-and-comers had in the tank, and his career was pretty darn good. I mean, what didn't he do? Just because you're a wrestling savant, though, doesn't mean you're going to have your moment, which is when in stepped Razor Ramon. Scott Hall knew talent when he saw it, and Waltman stood out like a sore thumb, so when it was time for them to tangle on Raw, he went out of his way to show everybody else what we had here. The footage of Razor beating the crap out of the 1-2-3 Kid has done the rounds time and time again, especially when Sean gets a surprise win after a moonsault. It was so well done and happened on WWE's then biggest platform that within seconds, everybody started to take notice. This was even more true as Kid had lost a lot of matches leading up to this point, so to see him shine from start to finish and get the victory, forget about it. He was good to go. And boy howdy did he make the most of that. Number 9, Tony Khan. So this one was ridiculous, wasn't it? We all like to think we would have known what to have said during the All Out 22 press conference, but in reality it was far tougher than some let on. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. To show the strength of his character, though, Tony Khan appeared on the 7th of September 2022 Dynamite, and he smashed it. Keeping a very statesman-like tone and ensuring he came across as the boss, Khan announced that the World and Trio titles are now vacant, and underlined how we were going to sort this situation out. I'm sure he would have liked to have gone into further details as well, but potential legal ramifications stopped that, and it just felt like a leader stepping up to the plate. Don't think he won't learn from all this either. We forget he's only been doing this job for 3 years. I would imagine from this point on he will use it to make AEW an all-round better place. And you can't get mad at that. Number 8, CM Punk. I have said it approximately 678 times now, but I'll say it once more. Wrestlers are human beings, and we must remember that. Why CM Punk felt the need to hit the chaos button at the All Out 2022 press conference, we shall never know for sure, and the aftermath has just been crazy. One of the most compelling stories for years. Let's not ignore his contributions over the last 12 months either, as Punk has proven that he's one hell of a talent. But when you do go scorched earth like he did, you're always going to divide the audience. Therefore, some people are now raising their eyebrow a little bit, despite crying with joy when CM returned to wrestling in his hometown of Chicago in 2021. As of me speaking, we don't really know how this is going to play out either, but I don't think anybody had this on their bingo cards. It is truly crazy. And what a difference a year can make. Number 7, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Don't believe the story as it is told today. While it was clear that then WWF had something with Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1996, it wasn't like he cut the 316 promo at the King of the Ring and that was that. Here was the biggest star ever. Nope. It was just another step in the journey. It certainly did spark fans to bring Austin 316 signs to arenas the land over, and to tie it into this list, it was when things started to turn for the man, as within months he'd been heading straight for the main event. The key to all of that was Bret Hart, though, who did what all good top guys should do. He saw that Stone Cold was about to explode, so reached down and tried to help him join the top of the card. Without that, the rattlesnake still would have found his way, but do not underestimate its importance. This was a combination of timing, talent, and help.
But we never looked back, did we? Talk about proving your doubters wrong. Number 6, Vince Russo. Many people forget this, but Vince Russo was once in charge of the WWF magazine. He would write fantasy stories and get up to other japes. Mostly because nobody else was really paying attention, he could do whatever he wanted. So imagine the rest of the creative team's surprise when after a Raw in 1997, Vince McMahon stormed in, threw a copy of the publication down, and asked why the narratives on his actual show weren't as good as the ones in the issue. I am not kidding. This is what Russo claimed anyway within a 1999 edition of Raw magazine, and there does seem to be some truth to it. Soon after, he was brought into the inner circle and helped out with the Attitude Era. And as cool as it is to run a supplement, I can only assume that Vince was far happier getting to control the lives of wrestlers, including ensuring that Val Venus got his PP choppied. I will never forget that, even though it happened over 20 years ago. Number 5, Diesel. Go and watch the 1994 Raw Rumble. That is how Kevin Nash should have been booked throughout his WWF Championship run, and why he was turned into Babyface 101 I will never know. Everyone just had to be flippin' Hulk Hogan. He was so dominant in that match he had an elimination record that lasted for years, and it was obvious he should be given the top prize in the game. This wasn't some accident. Fans were super into Diesel because he was a badass, not because he got beaten up in the ring by some bad guy. It was soon clear he was more than Shawn Michaels' bodyguard, although that role did get him through the door, and by the time those in Rhode Island were chanting his name, the future had been decided. Number 4, Eddie Kingston. Well, what a turnaround this was. When Eddie Kingston answered a Cody Rhodes challenge on a 2020 Dynamite, he was about to sell his wrestling boots just to stay afloat. Instead, he got the call, cut one hell of a promo, won over thousands of new fans, and got a full-time paying gig doing what he loves. Hell yeah. Kingston was always going to struggle to fit in because for years WWE was the only game in town and Eddie didn't fit that mold. It goes to show how silly pigeonholing is because we all know today that Kingston is a top-tier talent that can go toe-to-toe with anyone. The dude is beyond real. He also had an excellent match with Cody on that night which established him further, and within one pay-per-view cycle was headlining against his best friend Jon Moxley. Even better still, he has not put one foot wrong in terms of what he's done in front of the camera. Every feud, every backstage skit, every interview, the man delivers every single time, and all he needed was somebody to stick a mic in his hand on national TV during a pandemic, no less. Can you imagine if there had been a full house? We dare to dream. Number 3, The Acclaimed. I mean, they have been saying it since day one. Everybody loves The Acclaimed. And they were absolutely correct. I've been part of that crew for a while too because it was obvious they had something. When all that nonsense was going down with people crying, he's trying to be John Cena, you had to face palm. Last time I checked, Cena didn't invent rapping. The rise to the top was confirmed at All Out 2022 where they truly did elevate their game beyond any possible expectation. With their ridiculous Suzume Daddy catchphrase and the fact they had a great program with the Guns, Max Caster and Anthony Bowens walked into the pay-per-view to face Swerve in Our Glory for the Tag Team Championships and left more over than they went in, even though they lost. That, my friends, is professional wrestling. They are now a must-see on the show too, be it Caster's entrance diss track or how awesome Bowens is in the ring. And if they don't win the tag team titles by the time you hear this, something has gone very, very wrong. You can be assured I'll go on the internet and tweet about it as well. That's how much I believe in them. They rock. Number 2, Jon Moxley. Amazingly, there were some folk who thought Dean Ambrose leaving the WWE and becoming Jon Moxley was a mistake. These folk were incorrect. And it wasn't that they thought Mox wasn't a great talent, and that was clear even when he had to dress up as the Mountie, but because he had been through all that, there was this idea that nobody would buy him as a straight-up killer. Whoops. All it took was one ring walk in New Japan to make you realize this was a different dude, and by the time he had renamed his finish to the Death Rider, it was pretty clear what was going on. That name is ludicrous too out of context, but when you tie it up with the former Lunatic Fringe, it just works. He rubber-stamped this as well when he debuted at Double or Nothing in a truly iconic moment, and seeing the crowd lose it as he dropped Chris Jericho is worth watching over and over again. Ever since, he has just upped his game constantly. So he used this moment to re-establish himself, and today I would say he's one of, if not the most important part of All Elite Wrestling. I mean, can you see the promotion without him? Me neither. Number 1, Karrion Kross and Scarlett. It wasn't that big a surprise that Karrion Kross and Scarlett were brought back to WWE by Triple H. He had pushed them huge in NXT, so was clearly a fan, and as their main roster original debut had been so horrendous, the game thought they deserved another shot.
He was correct. The thing is, this does make all the sense in the world. Paul Levesque has long seen this type of act as something he believes he can make work, so by taking the creation as it was meant to be and slotting them into SmackDown, we can now see his intention come to life properly. It has been non-stop too, in the sense that the first thing Cross did on SmackDown was jump Drew McIntyre and stare down Roman Reigns, and I don't care who you are. That tells the audience that you're a big deal. Can't eyeball the tribal chief without the powers that be saying so. Right now we don't know if this is going to click, but it has been very refreshing seeing the pair being given a proper go without a gimp mask. And sure, the black and white presentation is a bit odd, but you know what they say. You can take the sports entertainment out of sports entertainment, but you can't take the sports entertainment out of sports entertainment. Actually, don't think anybody has ever said that. Never mind.
Wrestling is scripted, this we know. The challenge remains the same, however. No matter how a fan approaches a story, the wrestler still wants to convince them that what's happening may be more real than they realize. It's called the suspension of disbelief. Of course, when you are pushing the envelope, things can go too far, and the reaction after the fact is always carnage. The audience then realizes maybe something is going on here, and all of a sudden it becomes a story of itself. And that's the reason we keep on watching. So I am Simon Mello, and let's sit down and go over some of these moments and try and figure out what the flub was going on. Number 7, Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton. April 4th, 2025, SmackDown. Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton were preparing for their WrestleMania match as you'd expect. Had a big promo battle in the ring, and it was intriguing, and Flair was quite clearly pushing Tiffany throughout all of these interactions. There had been a few occasions already when Charlotte threw in some lines Stratton wasn't ready for. Let us see you think on your feet. When you can watch any major feud like this in WWE, the veterans do it all the time. It sort of boiled over here though, as the Chicago crowd got on Charlotte so much, she did seem a little bit phased. She was meant to be a babyface at the time, maybe. It was sort of all over the place. But of all the things, her podcast appearances leading up to this felt like she was trying to be more open. She got into detail about her recent divorces and her life struggles. These are always difficult things to discuss. It did mean once they started shouting at each other again, Tiffany decided to even the odds. Stratton wondered if Charlotte's foul mood was down to the fact she was now 0-3 in marriages. Sheesh. Flair then threw back that Kaiser had been in her DMs, and yes, at the time, Tiffany was dating Ludwig Kaiser. This was not part of the storyline too, and you can tell, they just started shooting. Even the way Stratton leaves the ring feels like she knew what she had done here, because she basically scarpers, and yes, you can see this on WWE Unreal. Now that series is part reality and part what WWE would like you to see, but I don't think Charlotte or WWE was very pleased with this at all. You just don't do that without clearance first. It did make for a fascinating Mania match though, which I will always defend. It was all over the place, but that made it stand out. It felt like a fight. It was totally chaotic. You can see this segment for yourself, though. I don't think it takes a genius to figure it out. Number 6, Ricky Starks and Adam Copeland. I am still super intrigued to know what happened on this episode of AEW Collision. It was the 14th of October 2023. The interaction between the two felt incredibly charged up. Ricky Starks and Big Bill had approached Bryan Danielson and Adam Copeland to talk about the AEW Tag Team titles, when he quipped to Adam, maybe you should stop looking at me with those bug eyes. Copeland can't have liked that, so he just erupted that Stark was nothing more than a vanilla midget version of The Rock. Man, that felt charged. As the Rated R superstar continued to talk over Ricky, Starks then threw in comments that all of this was really sending him over the edge. You can figure that one out. And that sort of ended this because Ricky was meant to be talking to Danielson at the time, and now he was just shouting at Adam Copeland. So how this got so emotional, I do not know, but it did. And you can just tell it wasn't part of the plan because there is some proper bass in these insults. It's never really been chatted about properly either, so I guess Ricky just found a way to push Adam's buttons, and that does happen. Not entirely sure vanilla midget is the best term in 2025 though, because the business has evolved. Wrestlers naturally have got smaller. I think ultimately it's been a bit of a net positive. By the time this was done, I expected the Curb Your Enthusiasm credits to roll. That's how uncomfortable it got. Number 5, Big Cass destroys a little person. So this is timely, given when I am recording this video. We just saw Dominic Mysterio introduce a little person pretending to be John Cena in a segment that felt like it was from 10 years ago. Turns out 7 years would have been more accurate, as Big Cass did this in 2018. It was the first of May SmackDown 2, and Big Cass was feuding with Daniel Bryan, so of course he got a little person to dress up as him. How that is a sentence I don't know, and just for the record, it was awful then and it's awful now. Just never understood what the joke is meant to be. For whatever reasons, the instructions from management to Big Cass was to just boot this guy and then leave it be, but he did not. As soon as he could, he laid in punches too, which was directly ignoring an edict from Vince McMahon. I mean, what the flub did you think was going to happen here? Enzo and Cass were already in hot water too, so this didn't help, and it clearly had an impact. This program with Bryan was ended super fast. Big Cass was released on June 18th. That is mere weeks afterwards. It's such an odd way to go off script too, because that's the number one rule of professional wrestling. Protect your opponent, and I can only presume this guy had no idea the rest was coming. To be fair, Cass has been very open about his personal issues at the time, and that likely didn't help either. It is an amazing story because my gosh, what a turnaround. And if you can Google this today and find an interview with Big Cass, I tell you man, it'll remind you that anything is possible. Number 4, Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. The television program Talking Smack was essentially designed to go off the rails. Daniel Bryan had been forced into retirement by WWE, and because he didn't agree with this decision, if they were going to force him to host a recap show, well, he was just going to do whatever the flubby wanted. There's loads of these in 2016, including that famous interaction with The Miz where they get on each other's asses. We also got this. Bryan looked over at his friend AJ Styles, who was a guest, and suggested that maybe, just maybe, the Phenomenal One believed in the Flat Earth conspiracy. You can see this in Styles' face instantly. He cannot believe it. AJ also tried to no-sell it while also hinting that maybe he's just read some interesting stories, and that was just more fire for Daniel. He would not let it go. I mean, as a wind-up, it is pretty good television, because this felt real, and Daniel Bryan couldn't hide the smile on his face. Now, it's only fair to make it very clear that ever since then, Styles has made it clear that he does not think this, and he was just reading about it at the time. Still, though, it was this kind of stuff that made Talking Smack compelling viewing, which is why when it got cancelled, fans were mad. Why would you do this? Given that we are now in a new era of WWE, I think we should bring it back. At the same time, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we're not even allowed press conferences. Number 3, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett returning to the WWF in 1997 did feel pretty damn big. He had been to WCW and come back, so the company wanted to lean into all of it. And he got his big promo on the 20th October Raw, and he went after everybody who had scorned him. He mentioned Eric Bischoff, he mentioned Vince McMahon, and then he started talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. That felt weird. What did Austin do? It soon turned out that Jarrett had taken umbrage with his 316 catchphrase, and that Steve was only bashing this out to try and put some money in his pocket. I assume the rattlesnake had no clue this was where Jeff was going to be going, because reportedly he was furious. Highlighted how easily that could start a backlash and even some merch sales. That's the last thing any wrestler wants, especially back then. That's where you made the majority of your money. It must have been received poorly by everybody as well, because Jeff never got his Austin feud. Steve just dropped him with a stunner one day to teach him a lesson, and that was that. There may be more to this as well, because it ties into a story that goes back years. When Austin was working for Jerry Jarrett, who was the father of Jeff during the territory days, Jeff saw Austin, who was just staring at a paycheck, when he shouted out, "Well, it ain't gonna get any bigger the more you stare at it." I think old Stone Cold took that as an insult, and yeah, he never forgot like an elephant. So no program for you. Number 2, Snoop Dogg at WrestleMania 39. Talk about things falling off the page super fast. It was kind of weird that Snoop Dogg and The Miz were guest hosts for WrestleMania 39 anyway, because what does that even mean? And also, Snoop had decided he was just going to screw over his partner. On Saturday night, he had an impromptu match with Pat McAfee, and then we did it again on Sunday. Shane McMahon returned Ring the Bell. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, Shane tore his quad almost instantly, and this was horrible. Aside from the awkwardness, you never want somebody to get hurt, but we were also mid-match. So what the flub were we going to do? Well, Snoop knew he was just going to fill in. You really do have to give him props as well, because nobody would have known this actually wasn't the plan, aside from the injury. The rapper just smacked The Miz in the mouth before delivering the funniest people's elbow you've ever seen. 1, 2, 3. All the credit to The Miz as well, who showed you once again why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. That dude just knows what he's doing, but yeah. For somebody who was not a professional wrestler, for Snoop Dogg to step into this so effortlessly, I mean, it was incredible. It was a great save. Fair play to that man, especially because he was probably high. Number 1, The Rock and Kevin Nash. The feud between the WWE version of the NWO and The Rock was actually laid on night 1. And No Way Out 2002, the Great One promised to stick various things up their asses, which led to some matches and of course more interactions. It also meant on a subsequent episode of Raw, Rocky told Kevin that he was a big daddy bitch in reference to his run as Diesel. Apparently nobody had told Nash this was going to go down, but my gosh, he was livid, and he even escalated the claim up the management chain. He wanted punishment. His main gripe seemingly was because he was unprepared and because The Rock kept on talking, Kevin couldn't respond, so that made him look a little bit like a doofus. Eventually he did chat it out with Dwayne Johnson, and actually it just sounds like Nash was really annoyed how badly the NWO were being booked. That was true too. It was so strange. As ever, WWE was doing the exact opposite of what we'd done in WCW. Before long, it was clear this was just a list of complaints and how the flub are we going to fix these? And the answer was, well, we're not going to. You know the rest. Don't want to be that guy either. But Kevin Nash was definitely on the other side of some of these promos throughout his career. I mean, you can see how some of his opponents responded to him. They weren't prepared either. So what goes around comes around. That's basically all wrestling is. Corpsing, or breaking on live TV, we all love it. It shows a more human side to performers, especially in wrestling, because if you've got a big bad grumpy heel who cracks a smile, I don't know, man, there's something nice about it all. Makes you feel warm and fuzzy in your dum-dum. Therefore, because it is entertaining, let's inject some positivity back into the world, because I am Simon Miller, the bald idiot. And yeah, here's 9 of the best moments from the world of sports entertainment when people broke right in front of your face. Number 9, dead man laughing. I actually spoke about this on my best goofy moments ever video because that's how good it is. Still have no idea what Steve Austin was thinking, but man, it is good stuff. It was at the height of the WCW versus WWE invasion angle with both teams about to go to war, and as such, Vince McMahon was cutting his big rah-rah speech. We can't lose, we gotta win. The future of wrestling depends on it. Of course, this had come after Stone Cold's heel turn, and look, while it wasn't good for business, it was great for Steve as a character. He lent into this paranoid, bizarre rattlesnake gimmick so strong the dude was hilarious. May have been a home run in that regard. Different video for a different day. Evidence of this came on this evening because despite the stakes, Austin decided he wanted to make The Undertaker break character, so repeated every single word that Vince said. It's genuinely funny too because Steve's cadence and delivery are so over the top, and yep, after a while you can see Mark Calloway holding on for dear life. Keeps covering his face, and he was notoriously focused on not giving away too much on camera. It's just so much damn fun though, and a reminder what wrestling should be, a nice little distraction. You can take all that other nonsense in your real life and throw it out the window. We're just here to have a good time. The extra good part is in the corner you can see Chris Jericho and Kane slowly going too, although not Kurt Angle. That man has it down, doesn't even blink, was likely thinking of ways he could probably join in. Number 8, Punkamania. So let's do a recent one because you likely saw it. It was the 20th of January 2025 Monday Night Raw, and as Hulk Hogan had been booed on the Netflix debut, I suppose CM Punk thought he was fair game. Punk also wanted to make it clear he was going to win the Royal Rumble, so during a mid-advert promo with Jackie Redmond, he said that even if Hulk Hogan enters the match, he will throw his dusty ass over the top rope. Also going to kill Hulkamania once and for all. Now Jackie is very good in her role, but this floored her. Couldn't hide her very real reaction and basically laugh right there on camera. I mean, it may have been shock. Punk then got back on track, but you can go and see this for yourself today, as you may have been focused on CM. As soon as you see Jackie, well, she erupts like a volcano. I would imagine she thought given what happened with Hogan, we'd all try and move on from this and not mention it. Not quite. He got banned from Collision. Sorry. The Royal Rumble. Number 7, Booker T and the NWO. Booker T does not get the credit he deserves. In both WWE and WCW, he was handed ridiculous creative and somehow managed to make it work. I mean, maybe not that program where he feuded over the letter T. That was like Sesame Street. Either way, though, the man just understood that being an idiot could be a huge positive. You gotta commit. Early on during his WWE run, he found himself in the revamped version of the NWO when he realized he had a problem. He needed his own entrance music to get pumped up for his match, and not the New World Order theme. Apparently Shawn Michaels had to A-OK this, but Booker got so annoyed of waiting on HBK, he just went on this massive rant at Kevin Nash and X-Pac, when, yes, he just decided to sing Sexy Boys if his life depended on it. I think he was trying to make a point. He ended it by hitting Shawn's pose, and that was it for X-Pac. He thought this was so ridiculous he just lost it, which set Nash off too. He held his lips together, trying not to let it show. As WWE loves to have that lingering camera shot, however, before cutting to what's next, you got a very solid view of what was happening. The New World Order were gone. It was likely the best thing the WWE version of the group did. All the rest of it was a bit like Vince McMahon didn't really understand what they were meant to be. Or he just didn't care. I mean, go watch WrestleMania 31, talk about it later. Number 6, Booker is back. Anytime you mention Booker T and Batista, you are probably going to think of the very real-life fight they had backstage. Both dudes have talked about it since, and the important part is they're friends now. You can throw some fists and move on. It was 2005, however, and Big Dave was not happy he'd been moved to SmackDown. I think during his time on Raw, he'd been told this is the A show, so being shifted to the blue brand felt like an insult, at least to him. Booker heard about this, so took offense given he was a star on SmackDown. So during the advert shoot for SummerSlam 2006, these guys fought. What happened depends on whose take you want to listen to, but ultimately WWE felt like this would make for a good TV feud. Use that rage on screen. Of course, this was when we had King Booker, who was deliberately over the top, and his aim did seem to be to make his colleagues break whenever he could. You don't even have to do much work here, because just find any face-to-face where Booker screamed Booker into Batista's face. That lip was quivering instantly. I think that sums up why they navigated these waters well, though. Booker T knew you can't always take yourself seriously, whereas Dave eventually found that part of himself too. Often when a performer gets that right, they can just go and go and go. Both of these dudes have done that long after they hung up the boots. It is meant to be fun after all, and I know we say that a lot, but we oh so often forget. Number 5, Vince and Mick get Steve. In May 1998, the WWF was all Steve Austin. He had won the world title the month before, so it was time to double down on that. And I doubt Stone Cold was worried about his spot, but of course he wanted to prove his worth. Many a wrestler have been anointed and then fallen off. He did not want that. Most thought it was nuts that Dude Love was Steve's first opponent, but actually it was perfect. Austin was about to reshape the main event scene in his image, and that meant brawling. And do you know who was brilliant at that? Mick Foley. To try and make it fresh, Foley had debuted his Dude Love character and sided with McMahon, which was nice and simple. And after wrecking old friend Terry Funk, he was a proper heel too. Soon got inserted into the over-the-edge title headliner. Dude versus Steve, WWE Championship up for grabs. I suppose because the gimmick was ridiculous, Foley and McMahon decided to bait Austin because good grief. When announcing this match, they go off-piste dancing at the top of the entrance ramp as more and more women in tie-dye join in. As controversial as he is today, Vince is hilarious too. He is just so damn convinced he's finally figured out how to beat his nemesis Steve Austin. When the camera cuts to the rattlesnake though, he is another one who is holding on for dear life. He's doing everything in his power not to laugh, which is the last thing he wanted. He was trying to get across the fact he was the toughest SOB on the planet. Before the show goes off air, he just lets it go, however, because he couldn't hold it in anymore. And I tell you once again, it's great, great stuff. I mean, anyone who did see that likely liked Stone Cold more. It's that human interaction, man. It's one of the easiest ways to get over. Number 4, Jey Uso and Cody Rhodes do some press. So it's another more recent one, and really it was the moment where many fans decided they did like Jey Uso. This really is great stuff. Amazingly, it happened post-Fastlane 2023 in the press conference where Jey and Cody Rhodes were celebrating being WWE Tag Team Champions. Good grief, today that feels like it happened in another lifetime. They had opened the pay-per-view and defeated the Judgment Day, so I presume had the rest of the show to enjoy their time. Or drink a lot of booze and who knows what else. It did mean they were super happy here, and they admitted to indulging in some libations. They then giggled through the whole thing like children. Cody even threw out some yeets which were part awkward but part hilarious, and Jey was just so over the top it essentially told people that sort of personality could become a world champion. Bingo. Rhodes at one point also asked his buddy, "Do you feel him, sir?" which is far funnier than you'd think, and it helped WWE, you know. It made it seem like the locker room was one big fun bust in a positive way. It's the sort of energy you want from wrestling. It also kind of felt like everybody was allowed to join in on this, so the feeling was mutual. This is still worth watching now, even if it is one of those dumb press conferences. Cody and Jey went out there and just stole the damn thing. Number 3, Jey laughs again. This one is actually quite weird because we don't really know what happened. It was the build to WrestleMania 38, and Brock Lesnar, as he is wont to do, was destroying vehicles to try and get to Roman Reigns. He hated that guy. Lesnar made sure to whoop the Tribal Chief's ass too, but in the background, the Usos for some reason were having the time of their life. Well, mostly Jey. Because that man was cracking up, and look, it's all on camera, this hasn't been edited, and to be honest, fans are a bit bored of another Brock Reigns feud, so this actually made the segment. It's as above. You started to realise there was more to one Jey Uso. Lesnar would soon rip the door off a vehicle as the bloodline ran away, but yeah, Jey was just over the moon. What a great time this was. Given that WWE had gone back to this well, the whole feud did need a little bit more levity, and wouldn't you know it, it came from Jey by accident. I do wonder if he got chewed out afterwards. I mean, it didn't fit the vibe at all, but in terms of me watching, I thought it ruled. Number 2, Sami Zayn and Becky Lynch break each other. The mixed match challenged was an unseen joy. It was made for Facebook, so it was nothing more than a money grab, but teaming a male wrestler up with a female wrestler and just letting them run riot was awesome. Remember that Oscar thumbs up meme? That's all from this nuts tournament. A forgotten duo was Becky Lynch and Sami Zayn, and honestly, thank goodness somebody did say they could just be their proper selves on TV. This was absolutely hilarious. It was 2018, and the story came from the fact that Becky was a good guy and Sami was a bad guy, and as they had just lost, they got into an argument. Should we blame the WWE Universe for what had happened? Well, they couldn't decide. The best part was it was the babyface that convinced the heel, because Lynch reminded Sami, "Oh my gosh, we had that birthday cake before we fought, and that likely had something to do with it." I mean, it was her birthday after all. From nowhere though, Zayn actually does agree when he goes in on the local bakery and says, "Isn't that typical of this stupid town?" Becky then loses it, literally looks at the floor laughing, This is one of the reasons she became a superstar. She is just the most lovable character. And she'll punch you in the face. Sami sees that as the green light too, so he pushes it even harder. And listen, this is only 2 minutes. Watch it. It will fill you with glee, and if you don't laugh along, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but you may be dead inside. Number 1, Uzi. Well, you knew this would be in here. It's what took the bloodline and arguably breathed new life into the thing, and it's why Sami Zayn was in the group to begin with. Just go and have some fun. Everybody loses it here too, including Sam, but make sure to keep an eye on Roman as well. He doesn't totally break, but throws in some laughs, pretending that's part of his speech. And it all came off the back of Zayn telling the crew Jay is struggling at the moment because he hasn't been feeling very Uzi lately. It's so crazy because if this had been a one-off and nobody in the ring cracked up, we would have smiled and moved on. I mean, it's a cute line, but nothing more. Jay, however, is totally gone, and good grief. He has to cover his mouth, literally grab his face. Whatever he has to do to not laugh on camera, he tries, and he totally fails. The man got live on SmackDown. By the end, he is physically shaking, and that's when they're all just a mess. The whole segment goes off the rails, but it is perfect. Without this, it would have just been another whatever, but with this, well, you should probably watch it at least every single month. It's the absolute highlight of the year. It ties into all of the above, though. We have to let wrestlers show a more human side, and it's always going to click with the audience. Also makes us feel like we're part of a special club because we are nerds. This one really is all-time stuff. Just before Dominic Mysterio's rematch with John Cena in the 2025 Survivor Series, WWE turned back the clock. A little person came out dressed like Cena to troll the audience until Dominic beat him up. It did kind of feel like we were watching a Raw from 2010. Now, if you did enjoy it, I think that's awesome. These are your entertainment hours, so whatever works, and really, it was pretty innocent. Some dumb humor to try and get a laugh from the crowd, and some people did chuckle away. And as for the wrestler in question, they did an interview afterwards, and they were over the moon. That is good stuff. Sadly, things aren't always as light as this, and I tell you, how the following 8 segments appeared on television, I do not know, but they did. And WhatCulture has asked I, Simon Miller, to give them to you. So let us learn a lesson. Never do it again. Number 8, the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club. Let's go back to the usual challenge, and yes, I shall be talking about this a lot during this video. Would you fancy showing this to a non-fan today to try and get them to watch? No, you wouldn't. And this person would judge you. This really was bottom of the barrel stuff, and here is some history if you are indeed a new fan. During a period where WWE would try anything to get ratings, Vince McMahon decided certain people should kiss his ass. I mean, literally 2, you bend over and either have your face shoved into that crack or you do it under duress. I mean, even saying that, I believe it's absolutely terrible. And occasionally this was genuinely done to embarrass certain individuals like Jim Ross and Mick Foley, and while William Regal had to do it too, somehow he turned it into more of a comedy skit. We do not sing Regal's praises enough. The man just got it no matter what. The end story was still Boss abuses his power for his own means, however, which is atrocious, and even the likes of Shawn Michaels had to do it. Son Shane knocked HBK out, so this went down with a man unconscious. Now that I thought about it, that's even worse. Shane eventually got it too, because of course he did, and Hornswoggle couldn't escape it either. And yeah, Vince himself got a sort of induction when he went into Rikishi's behind, but even with that comeuppance, no, it was just bad wrestling. And also, who was this for? Who was going to tune in to see this? And if you did, good grief. Go look in the mirror, you've got serious issues, and I think you're disgusting. Number 7, Billy and Chuck's wedding. When Billy Gunn and Chuck Palumbo started teaming together in 2002, it was actually quite ahead of its time. I suppose at first they were just meant to be more flamboyant than anything else, but there was a potentially good message here. Be yourself, because you totally rule. The issue as ever with pro wrestling is that this soon became totally unnuanced, as the idea was Billy and Chuck are gay, and therefore they're heels. I mean, it's so reductive and it's such low-hanging fruit. Sexuality shouldn't have anything to do with where you fall on the heel or face side. A lot of the jokes were also horrifically put across, the proof being when WWE decided to do the classic wrestling wedding. I mean, they made their way to the ring to the song It's Raining Men, and it was the Godfather who interrupted all this. He doubted what was going down because he knew both of them used to sleep around with so many women. I tell you, this was awful. The punchline was even worse as the pair soon realized people thought they were homosexual and reacted like they were insulted. They're not gay. And this was totally regressive. And if you were gay, you likely felt slightly put off if nothing else. This doesn't need to be treated as a joke, especially as there was nobody on the other side. If you are going to do this, you need other characters that are just gay and getting on with their life, because it doesn't matter that they're gay. Otherwise, the joke is literally, lol gay, it's ridiculous, and we shouldn't have done it. So once more again, I ask you, my friends, would WWE do this now? And of course they wouldn't. It was also worse back then too, because homosexuals were oppressed when it came to gay marriage. None of this was good, and hence why you never see it referenced on TV today. I just think you want to make sure that all pillars of a community are represented when we are talking about celebrities and entertainment. WWE was not doing that back in 2002, so all of this was totally crap. Number 6, the Muhammad Hassan SmackDown attack. So this always comes up in lists like this, and for good reason. It's very similar to what we just talked about in many ways. What is happening in real life, and how can we make that controversial? Therefore, a couple of years after the 9/11 attacks, WWE did indeed debut Muhammad Hassan, and look, at first you could argue it was an interesting character. Hassan would talk about how awful it was that America had thrown all Arabs into one category, which was offensive and unfair. He was right. Then before long, it just became foreign heel nonsense. It was so bad, and good grief, did we then take it too far. It was July 2005, and the London tube system was attacked in some horrific terror bombings, with many people being killed. It sent shockwaves around the world, and yet somebody didn't tell WWE that maybe airing their pre-taped SmackDown segment was not a good idea. Because on the same day, we saw The Undertaker ambushed by a group of people in masks, and, well, look at the picture. They were also instructed to choke Taker and slice their throats before they carried him on their shoulders to the back. The imagery was undeniable. This was meant to resemble a terror attack. It would have been horrible even if the London bombings hadn't have happened, but to do it at the same time, everybody was upset, including the network that aired the show. They told Vince McMahon that character had to go. The Undertaker then threw him through the stage at the Great American Bash pay-per-view, and yep, he was done, never to be seen again. It was so poorly thought out, and as above, this is never mentioned today because it was in such poor taste. There's stories to tell with such characters, but they have to be researched and well played out. This was the opposite. Man, did we totally drop the ball. Number 5, Degeneration X mimicked the Nation of Domination. I saw a message thread the other day discussing if the Nation of Domination should be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. There's absolutely an argument for this when somebody mentioned the segment we're going to talk about. Is this the real reason WWE doesn't do it? Because maybe it would all be thrown back into the public consciousness, and believe you me, WWE does not want that. It is very hard to talk about, so I will do my best, but let's get one highlight out the way. Jason Sensation's Owen Hart impression was right on the money. If you closed your eyes, you wouldn't actually know otherwise. Sadly, as for the rest of it, well, it was totally off-piste. Aside from the fact that Degeneration X changed their skin color, which is totally unhinged, the whole segment was reductive and insulting. I don't want to speak on behalf of a whole community, but I can't imagine a huge portion of the fan base was happy with this. And also, once again, what was the joke? It was just terribly thought out, and what was going through people's minds, I don't know. On a lesser level, it was also full of toilet humor, and Jerry Lawler on commentary is insufferable. Some people say it's just what we did back then, but that's a poor excuse. It shouldn't have been going on back then either. D'Lo Brown, who of course was part of the Nation, summed it up well in many an interview. He said you could have done this without the blackface, and he's right. That was so pointless. As ever, sit down and watch this with somebody who isn't a fan, and then come and tell me what they think. But you won't do that, because that would be crazy. This really was a swing and a miss. We shouldn't have been swinging in the first place. Number 4, Trish Stratus barks like a dog. Now, Trish Stratus has talked about this and actually is quite level-headed with it. If anybody gets to have the final say, it's her. And no, she didn't much enjoy it when she did have to do this with Vince McMahon, but in the end, he did get his comeuppance, and that's the story. The bully tries to be a dickhead and eventually gets smacked in the balls. I still don't think this is what we want wrestling to be, at least I don't. Sports entertainment is meant to be an escape, and this was anything but. It was also essentially objectifying women at a time when that's all the female roster was allowed to be. This was their role, which is why Trish Stratus and Lita deserve so much credit. Even with faced with all this, they still managed to main event Raw. I mean, that is game-changing. Then one day, Vince McMahon decided to make Trish strip down to her underwear and bark like a dog. This was due to the fact that McMahon felt like she had disrespected him, even though at the time it was he who was having an affair. He made his wife Linda watch. I mean, I feel bad just saying that because it's terrible. And sure, it did get heat and Stratus slapped the shit out of him eventually, but it's just so bad. Again, it's the exact opposite of what I believe you want to be doing on your wrestling TV programs. There is so many ways to get boos, and I don't think you need to resort to this. I mean, build stars like Rhea Ripley and the rest of the people running around the main roster right now. Don't denigrate them like this. Number 3, the live sex celebration. Did Edge want to do this? Nope. Did Lita want to do this? Nope. But Vince McMahon told them they had to do it anyway. This is also how we celebrated Edge winning his first WWE title too, and can you imagine? You finally achieved your dream, you're on top of the world, now you have to strip naked and pretend to hump your partner. I mean, that's unreal. It was 2006 as well, so the Attitude Era was long gone, and this didn't do anything meaningful with the characters. Shock TV, for better or worse, has always been part of wrestling, but this was so lacking in rhyme and reason it felt even worse. You may as well have just shouted "sex on television" from the top of your lungs. Lita has also gone on record saying she protested this and was basically told, you either do it or you're gone. And that just makes it bottom of the barrel stuff. I mean, look at Dominic Mysterio in 2025 to see how this can be achieved, and what we were doing 20 years ago was the exact opposite. It's not like it led anywhere either, it was just done to pop a rating, and when you have the actual participants turning around going, I'm very not comfortable with this, please can we do anything else, and they do get turned down, well, something really has gone very, very wrong. It's not like anybody talks about it today either as this bastion of good wrestling television. No. Everybody thought this was totally pants, which is ironic, because good grief did we see a lot of pants. Number 2, Vince says the N-word. So far be it from me to talk about this, as there are way more important voices that can speak to it, but let's keep it simple. Do not go on TV as a white man and say this word. It's not hard to figure out why. You can research for 5 minutes and you'll work it out. Vince McMahon did say this to John Cena because I guess Vince believed that's what those in the hip-hop community did, and Booker T then reacted. Again, Booker gets to have the final word, and he has said he didn't have much of an issue with it, and I just want to leave it there. Personally, I'd rather we didn't drop slurs on wrestling television, because again, wrestling is meant to be an escape, and you really don't know how your audience is going to take it. Number 1, the Hulk Hogan Netflix debut. So who knew this would be such a moment in time, but the evidence was apparent afterwards. WWE did stop talking about it. In fact, Hulk Hogan basically vanished from TV. It all tied into the awful stories that had come out about Hulk during the years prior. So when he walked out on the January 6th Raw as the show debuted on Netflix, he got booed out the place. It's toe-curling to watch because Hogan decided to ignore this and do his usual routine. It sort of made you want to bury your head in the sand, and I think a lot of us expected the Curb Your Enthusiasm credits to play. Hulk would say afterwards it was due to his political leanings, but it very much felt like this was linked to the horrendous comments he had been caught saying on tape. The word was always he refused to properly apologize too, and of course that left a sour taste in a lot of people that were working backstage in WWE. They expected Hulk Hogan, one of the heroes of pro wrestling, to come out and apologize, and he didn't do that, and that really does just make it even worse. Now, of course, you can't tell the history of wrestling without Hulk Hogan, who did change the game. When you start talking about Terry Bollea, it is totally uncool. It basically ties into other things we've said during this video. Have respect for your fellow man, your fellow woman, and the human race. I mean, it costs nothing to be nice. You really do have to try to be an asshole.
AEW promised creative freedom. No scripts, no writers, just wrestlers speaking from the heart. And sometimes over the past 7 years, the heart has said things that should never ever have been said on live television. From accidental shoot promos to career-ending sentences, this is what happens when you take the leash off the wrestlers and the cameras keep rolling. I'm Andy from WhatCulture, and here are the 12 most insane things wrestlers have ever said on AEW TV. And a quick warning before we dive in, there will be some adult language used in this video. Number 12, Rick Ross does a no-no. Remember Royal Rumble 2020 when Keith Lee was making his entrance into the match and a clearly impressed Brock Lesnar could be seen mouthing, "Oh, big boy." Well, on the Holiday Bash 2022 episode of Dynamite, we got a sequel delivered by a rapper without a filter. When Lesnar first shared a ring with Keith Lee, he asked, "Who's this motherfucker?" When Rick Ross was in there with Lee 2 years later, he said, "You a big motherfucker." Rose was in AEW as an extension of Swerve Strickland's Mogul Affiliates stable, which, if you recall, featured a guy whose career took off by winning a few Lesnar lookalike contests, Parker Boudreaux, and a former baseball prospect with an entirely tattooed face, Trench. Swerve had recruited Trench and Boudreaux to deal with Lee, his former Swerve in Our Glory tag team partner. In this segment, Ross was there to mediate a face-to-face between Strickland and Lee, which went awry when Rick interrupted his own promo, seemingly mesmerized by the size of Keith's traps and delts, to marvel at the big man, or big motherfucker in this case. One day later, on Busted Open Radio, Rick explained, "I just had to express my heart. He's a big motherfucker. He really is." Hard to argue with, really. Number 11, Brandy Rhodes runs wild. If it wasn't the most bizarre run in company history, Brandy Rhodes' spell in AEW was certainly the most uneven. The constant whiplash was insane. Starting out as some kind of manipulative Stephanie McMahon parody, constantly meddling in the women's division, Brandy later became a furious valet promising bloody vengeance, playing a superb role in husband Cody's feud with Shawn Spears. After that, her Amdram supernatural leanings got the better of her, resulting resulting in perhaps the most universally pooped on stable in AEW history, the Nightmare Collective. Weirdly obsessed with getting over as a heel, Rhodes became an effective supporting character as a babyface. She had the fire, and she breathed it straight down Jade Cargill's throat in a takedown that sits somewhere between infamous and ironically iconic. On the 11th of November 2020, Jade's first night in AEW, by the way, Brandi created an entirely new entry in the pro wrestling lexicon, saying, "Who the hell told you it was open mic night, b***?" It was unhinged and chaotic, but good grief, the rhythmic delivery was superb. Brandi's facial expressions were fierce, and after it was over, you could barely believe it had happened. Granted, such an emphatic burial of Cargill on night one probably wasn't ideal, but hey, at least it was entertaining. And we won't even go into Brandi's various dalliances with Dan Lambert. No, we won't do that. Number 10, MJF, General. MJF has the sharpest tongue in the game today, and as a heel, he is very clever with it. He knows exactly where the line of taste and decency is. He doesn't usually cross it. He struts towards it, places his hands on his head, swivels his hips, and thrusts against it. MJF also happens to be very funny, so when he does cross the line, it's usually a good laugh. In the pandemic, a major AEW storyline saw MJF trying to take the Inner Circle over from under Chris Jericho. During this, the group held a town hall segment. When podcaster Conrad Thompson asked if Sammy Guevara would ever rejoin the group, MJF responded, "Oh my god, turkey tits, you cannot be serious right now." MJF has been accused of resorting to cheap edgelord heat, but he was a sharp mind in 2020 and worked around limitations better than most. Having already been smart enough to build dialogue with other characters outside of his feuds, he maintained his heel persona with no fans in the building too. As he beat up Marco Stunt, he shouted towards commentary, "Hey Shivani, you fat prick, tell Jungle Boy this is what's coming to him at Double or Nothing." MJF also addressed, quote-unquote, Brian Pillman by lowering his head towards the canvas. He told Bryan Danielson that his mentor William Regal was a worthless drug addict, and he once threatened to strap Wardlow to a cross just like Jesus. The boy's got a mouth on him, folks. Number 9, the Cody Rhodes exit interview. Nobody expected Cody Rhodes to jump ship from AEW to WWE in 2022, so when he claimed to be working without a contract that January, nobody took him seriously. He was doing silly maniacal stuff every single week as part of the Codyverse, and in his last infamous promo, it just felt like an extension of the mysterious Jazz Odyssey that nobody understood. In it, Cody basically built a feud with CM Punk that wasn't in the plans, praising Punk for his comeback, but mentioning that he had done everything Punk had only ever fantasized about. This felt like a veiled message to Tony Khan. Was Cody jealous of Punk's top billing? Was he using his leverage for a new deal on live television? Or had he already left? Rhodes has since told Sam Roberts that the promo was selfish, saying he cut it to remind everybody of his stature in AEW. But it gets wilder than that, folks. Cody has called it his AEW exit interview. He exited AEW, of course, to join WWE, which he indirectly buried twice in the promo, even though he was going there. He mocked NXT as developmental, rubbishing its hip toss class. Then he mocked WWE for renaming wrestlers. When referencing Gunther, he said, "We're not in the business of renaming people like Gunnar McGillibuddy or whatever the hell that is." 4 years later, he has since become the biggest babyface wrestler in the world, but rewatching this promo in 2026, you really wonder what was going on in Cody's head at the time. Number 8, Sammy Guevara demands respect. The problem with Sammy Guevara is twofold. He is an exciting babyface wrestler with a heel's charisma, and his foretold destiny as a pillar of AEW means his mid-card fate feels like an embarrassment. Sammy's career has not hit the heights of fellow pillars MJF, Darby Allin, and even Jack Perry, despite gifting AEW fans with many incredible moments throughout his run. But to be fair, Sammy at times hasn't exactly done himself many favors. His dreadful pre-fame comments about Mercedes Moné suggested a lack of maturity, and he has lived down to that reputation on a few occasions. You can sort of see where he was going with his bizarre rant on the 13th of September 2022 episode of Rampage. Guevara wanted respect. He was a day one AEW guy who wasn't just there because he got fired from WWE, and he didn't even have an action figure. He was riffing on the state of AEW, turning heel on the promotion for failing him or something, and then it went a bit mental. Here's what he said. "And here I am, putting on 5-star matches that I don't even get recognition for. Huh, Meltzer? Where's my stars? You want to give stars to all your favorites, but where's my stars?" What? First of all, the kayfabe goal of a wrestler is to win, not put on a 5-star match. Surely they would want to win in quick, one-sided fashion, not in a drawn-out 30-minute Meltzer baiter. Secondly, how did we reach a point where Sammy Guevara, who actually had a 5-star match at this point, was complaining about Dave Meltzer on television? This was the sort of incomprehensible nightmare that drives the characters in Dark Souls games hollow. Number 7. Jake Roberts gets sexual. It started so well for Jake the Snake in AEW. Channeling his old sinister magic in a 2020 promo opposite Cody Rhodes, Roberts talked about a secret client ready to annihilate the nightmare. This sparked intrigue, conversation, and speculation, and Jake continued to impress when he was narrating vignettes. Lance Archer was his client and quickly settled into a fun, if familiar, arc of Monster of the Week. Jake, meanwhile, became less and less great in a live setting, primarily because he kept saying a bunch of weird shit. At All Out 2020, Lance won a casino battle royal to determine the #1 contender to the world title. In the build to this, Archer and Roberts came out on Dynamite for a pissing contest with Team Taz. It was cool seeing a rare heel-to-heel interaction, or at least it was until it got distractingly, unintentionally funny. "Let me tell you something," Jake said. "You're just a couple of squirrels trying to get a nut." Well, you're not gonna bust a nut anytime we're in the ring. Do you see what I'm saying? No, not really, mate. God knows what exactly Jake was trying to accomplish. He once compared successful crowd psychology to sexual intercourse, saying a wrestler shouldn't pop too early. Perhaps by busting a nut, what he really meant was you won't win in the end. Or maybe he just wanted to make Big Lance corpse. Who the hell knows? Number 6. Hangman Page goes off script. The term scripted promo is an iffy one. All wrestling promos are scripted to some extent. Even wrestlers who aren't being handed a script beforehand set out a plan for what they're gonna say, generally clearing it or collaborating with their rival. This helps avoid crossing any lines and ensures that face-to-face responses actually make sense. According to CM Punk, so take this with a pinch of Pepsi, this is exactly what Hangman Page didn't do during their feud of spring 2022. Before the feud, producer Colt Cabana, a known Punk enemy, had been demoted from his duties. Meanwhile, Ace Steel, a known Punk friend, had just started as a producer. Page felt this wasn't a coincidence and entered the infamous workers' rights promo battle with a noticeably weird demeanor. With no context of the backstage problems that had yet to be reported, Hangman seemed inexplicably grumpy towards Punk, who was actually respectful in a may the better man win type of way. This is despite Page declaring before the face-to-face that he was going to destroy CM Punk. In the parameters of the story, and given that we didn't know the backstage gossip yet, Hangman's fury felt insane. In their Go Home segment, Page said that Punk talks a good game about workers' rights, but had shown the exact opposite since he'd been in AEW. Page said that he wanted to save AEW from Punk. Punk, bemused and angry, could only quietly seethe in response. Until a few months later. Number 5. CM Punk issues a receipt. On the 17th of August 2022 Dynamite, CM Punk cut a promo. That promo included a receipt issued to Hangman Page. Although Fightful had reported on Colt Cabana's demotion and the resulting unrest, the backstage turmoil had yet to fully leak. So, when Punk addressed Page, it felt like a storyline pivot, something in kayfabe. Perhaps the main event of All Out would be a freeway for the AEW title or something like that. But it felt disconnected from actual AEW storylines because that's exactly what it was. Punk was shooting, and it made even less sense because the receipt was delayed several months. If you recall, Punk was on AEW's injury list all summer, during which his mood darkened. Punk offered Hangman a world title rematch, knowing full well that Page wasn't going to accept it. It was not part of the show or the plan. Then, when Hangman didn't respond, Punk said, "That's not cowboy shit, that's coward shit." He added, "The apology should be as loud and public as the disrespect." That night, on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer filled in the context, and AEW was never the same again. By 2024, the company-wide drama and disarray included real-life backstage fights, soft brand splits, and Punk's eventual firing. It was so intense, Tony Khan resorted to booking multiple storylines based on restoring the feeling to AEW, a fight that some would argue is still ongoing today. Number 4. Jim Jim Ross, Boomer Gooner. In my not so humble opinion, Jim Ross is the greatest wrestling commentator of all time. The list of legendary moments made better by his Oklahoman tones is bigger than the APA's bar tab, and even today, as sparing as his schedule is, he can still be counted on to add gravitas to an important AEW match. But Ross has faced criticism during his time in AEW, particularly during the early days when he would regularly vocalize his struggles with the house style. Jim would frequently insinuate that the wrestlers were doing too much, and at one point declared, "This is not good booking," during a segment between Brandy Rhodes and Dan Lambert, which, come to think of it, was bang on the money. But the point is that a commentator is there to enhance, not detract, and sometimes, including when there have been women on screen, Ross's commentary has fallen into the latter category. On the February 26, 2020 Dynamite, AEW held an official weigh-in for Chris Jericho versus Jon Moxley, including boxing-style ring girls. International viewers on the Fight feed heard a presumably horny Ross mutter, "Holy shit, look at that," when JR spotted one such talent walking to the ring. This prehistoric gooning was a long-standing problem. At All Out 2020, Ross asked, "Did Anna Jay have a wardrobe malfunction, or is that just wishful thinking in my book?" Anna Jay was 22 years old at the time. Number 3, Toni Storm General. This video could easily have been 20 minutes of Toni Storm quotes. Since becoming timeless, Toni has literally branded herself the whore you all adore. She loves an innuendo, frequently peppers her promos with filthy quotes, and pretty much drops one every single week at this stage. They practically pour out of her, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Toni leans all the way into her character, never slipping out of it, even when she's doing fan conventions. Combined with her delivery, which bizarrely conjures Margaret Thatcher, Toni is an innuendo machine. She once threatened to sock Deonna Purrazzo right in that box of hers, and when met with the challenge of Anna Jay, Storm promised to clap those cheeks all the way back to Georgia. Toni is so great, she can put over her opponents and ridicule beloved commentators in one line. On Chris Statlander, she said, "You know, the last time I faced Chris Statlander, she dropped me on my head and I lost 3 inches. But then I saw Mr. Schiavone and got it right back." While this technically wasn't said on AEW television, but rather Stardom, Toni revealed that Stan Hansen once gave her a lariat, but not with his arm, which is some mental image. Basically, anything that comes out of Toni Storm's mouth was eligible for inclusion. So much of it is so beyond the pale that it's basically translucent. Number 2, Tony Schiavone will not tolerate Mariah May. Tony Schiavone is one of the greatest AEW signings ever. He has added soul, enthusiasm, wit, credibility, and charm, and his velvet smooth voice remains a pleasure to listen to. He is excellent at remaining impartial because he is smart enough to grasp that it means something whenever he gets candid or animated about a particularly dastardly character. His early aversion to MJF was fantastic. He was neither nice nor neutral, nor did he play devil's advocate about anybody else, which portrayed MJF as an exceptionally monstrous young man. Tony's association with Britt Baker was TV gold. At first, Baker was awful to Schiavone, then they entered a strange friendship. Before it turned into something quite genuine and lovely, Britt basically kept Tony around as her gopher. Schiavone eventually plucking up the courage to call her a b*** was a fantastic line, even better for its timidity. This careful, disciplined approach to speaking his mind was used to sensational effect when Mariah May turned heel on Toni Storm. Brilliantly, Schiavone didn't even bother waiting for May to explain her actions when she cut a promo the next week. He had seen enough, and as Mariah gloated to the crowd, Schiavone said, "Speak, bitch. Come on now." Number 1, Jeff Jarrett wigs out. It still isn't clear what the endgame was to the Jeff Jarrett vs MJF saga that stretched all the way from January 2025 to January 2025. If Jeff Jarrett was actually going to win the AEW World title, or if this was just a way of building to a big match with MJF, we will never know, because Double J lost his damn mind before we found out. Jarrett and MJF had a face-to-face on the 15th of January 2025 Dynamite. MJF did his usual shtick. Clad in a blue blazer, he tried to get a rise out of Jarrett by reminding him of his battles with substance abuse. You've seen it before, you know the drill. MJF talks some trash, and the babyface responds by calling his mom and fiancé a trollop. Actually, what? The key line in Jarrett's bizarre promo was, "I was you before you were you," a flawed premise to begin with. Fans never saw Jarrett as a line-stepping evil little monster. He was more notorious for being a diet Triple H-style politician. The line didn't get any kind of reaction because nobody believed it, which made the following really excruciating. Jeff's big idea here was to out MJF MJF, a bizarre choice given that AEW had attempted to cast him as an aging babyface warhorse. Jarrett said he felt sorry for MJF because it must have been tough being raised by a call girl mother. Jeff said that MJF's old lady was a Canadian call girl who Jarrett claimed had a gangbang with 10 other wrestlers in the parking lot. This was unfathomably weird. Don Callis would have played a better babyface.
I personally do not like the term botch. The only person who gets how to use that is Matthew from Botchamania, and of course you can always laugh at mistakes in the ring as long as everybody is okay. But to act like these things can't happen or now the wrestlers involved suck, I mean, come on bro, that is not fair. It is always going to happen as well because that's just the way of things, and even the best of us have off nights. Do you know who's more aware of this as well? The people in the damn ring. They've experienced it. It's like when you make a mistake at work, all of a sudden you want to cry. So I am Simon of the Board A-Hole, and let's go through some of the more famous one of these right now and try and figure it out. Number 9, The Undertaker versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 33. Now this one did irk me a little bit at the time because the world title is not on the line, so why did it main event? Even if The Undertaker was planning on retiring, it kind of felt like we should have shouted about that more in the build, and he carried on wrestling anyways. It just felt like it would have been better served in the middle of the card. Roman Reigns and The Undertaker are huge stars. You don't even need me to tell you directly because the dead man has spoken about this a lot. He hates this match. Feels like he didn't do right by Reigns because he was so beaten up, so it didn't go the way he would have liked it to. He's not wrong either because and numerous times throughout this they both slip or a move doesn't go to plan. There's then a lot of resetting as they try to get it going again. It's not that fun to see. The tombstone spot goes totally awry and it didn't really live up to expectations or what you'd want from a WrestleMania main event. This isn't something to be ridiculed, however. In fact, it's just a shame. I think if it happened today too, Roman would actually be able to save this with the added experience, but in 2017 it just wasn't gonna happen. The real disappointment for me anyway was the next night on Raw. The big dog got booed out of the place, and that should have been the catalyst for the start of the Tribal Chief character. Nope. For whatever reason, we carried on with the failed babyface push regardless. That was really weird. Number 8, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 34. You know something has gone bad when the man who just won the WrestleMania main event gets backstage and hurls his world title at Vince McMahon. Now it is wrestling, so maybe it was pre-planned, but you can see footage of Brock Lesnar doing this and he is pissed. I don't think Lesnar could fake that. That is not his lane. I'm not surprised either because this Roman match was ridiculous. It actually has nothing to do with the performers, and more this insistence that Reigns had to be kept babyface despite being booed in every single building. Most fans just accepted he finally would win the WWE Championship back at this Mania, and fine. If that's what management wanted to do, stop delaying it, make the damn switch and we can see what happens. Furthermore, Brock doesn't really turn up to work, so at least Reigns will, when somebody got cold feet. It was so silly because if McMahon really didn't believe in this project, then just change things. Instead, we had Lesnar win with one F5 and we held off the change for another month. I can only assume it's because Vince didn't want any backlash at the biggest show of the year. Well, he got it anyway. It just felt so disjointed. The match also struggles because the crowd just do not buy in because of all the above. So in that sense, it did fall apart. The disparity between what fans wanted and what the creative team were going to give them was huge. It also sort of felt like no man was going anywhere. There was no set direction. And it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. This was Tribal Chief time, the TCT, and we didn't do that until the world literally stopped. Sometimes stubbornness is not the answer. Number 7, Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice at WrestleMania 7. This was much like our first entry, as there was a selection of fans that felt slightly annoyed that Hulk Hogan was in the main event of WrestleMania just because he was Hulk Hogan. The world title had already been defended earlier in the night. If you switch those two matches around, this actually wouldn't have been that bad. Hogan himself had also taken a public relations kicking, so was about to take some time off, and it all tied in. It was just a catalogue of bad news when the WWF turned Sid Justice heel so Hulk could work with a monster. Now look, I love Sid, the man was crazy, but this was not the right last bout for WrestleMania 7. It fell apart. It was the ending where this was most evident, because after the leg drop of Doom, Papa Shango was meant to run to the ring and break up the pin. Charles Wright, for whatever reason, then didn't get his time cue though, so he was late, meaning Sid just had to kick out. So that's bad news number 1. People did not just kick out of Hulk Hogan's finish. You also see Shango freeze in real time because what does he do now? He is super late. Well, he just whacked Hogan in the penis and the beatdown was on. Do make sure you watch the clip of this because you can see Papa slow down when running to the ring as he realizes what's happened. We've all been there. I know that feeling. Should be in the dictionary as oh no. Of course, it was sort of saved by the return of the Ultimate Warrior, but poor Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. They had to ignore all of this because they knew what the proper finish was, and they didn't want to draw attention to it. I don't want to be horrible, but at least parts of this are quite funny. Number 6, Cody Rhodes versus John Cena at WrestleMania 42. Let us throw a more recent match in there for your brain, and I blame this on one human alone, Travis Scott. Because before he takes 68,678 years to walk to the ring, John Cena versus Cody Rhodes is fun. Seeing John go full heel with punches and kicks is just a treat, and they seem to be having a ball in there. I don't think the crowd was necessarily into Cena's heel turn, but they still made a lot of noise. The atmosphere was great. When you do get Scott's song blaring over the speakers, though, it just goes sideways, mostly because the crowd mistook this for The Rock. I think that is what pops the bubble too, because Las Vegas soon realized they were getting Travis and not Dwayne Johnson. And, well, that's not what they wanted. It affected the match because from this point on it's all over the place, and by the time Cena had cheated to win his 17th world title, the vibe was weird. I think people were trying to catch up. I still don't get why Travis Scott took so long either, because that disturbed the flow of the thing. Cody knew he had to thump him, so he was just hanging out playing Nintendo. Rhodes also sort of hinted at this recently, saying he sees the Mania and SummerSlam matches as a part 1 and part 2, so I would assume he is aware. If you do go back to back with them, it's way better. And just fast forward past the interference during match 1, and then hit stop after Cena and Cody embrace at SummerSlam. You know what I'm talking about. You do not need it. Number 5, Triple H versus Scott Steiner at the 2003 Royal Rumble. I find it hard to take too many shots at this because it all comes down to age. I was a fetus watching this, and because it was two massive dudes crashing into each other, well, I thought it was awesome. Scott Steiner had also come from WCW, which I thought was cool. Sometimes you do have to watch things with a kid brain. Your innocence does vanish eventually though, and yeah, if you watch this today, it ain't great, mostly because poor Scott can't walk. I've no idea what WW was thinking, but Steiner had a serious case of drop foot during his last run of the company, and yet they sort of ignored it. Maybe that was his choice, but don't put a guy with that sort of ailment in long matches. Keep them short and intense, push the strengths, hide the weaknesses. Instead, this went 18 minutes, and really I don't think Triple H and Scott Steiner liked each other. Neither gives an inch, and you could almost hear them saying, I am going to outflex you during this. There was a definite case of wanting to literally be the big man. Steiner also runs out of gas due to his size and this injury, and WWE knows it too. Soon after this, he was moved down the card, but the damage had already been done. It was a massive shame because in 2003, you did need matches like this. It felt fresh, but it just didn't click. In fact, it went the other way. You don't even need to see it now. You're just gonna be a little bit upset. Number 4, Charlotte Flair versus Nia Jax on the 30th of August 2021 Raw. To this day, I want to know what happened here. The feeling was good in WWE in the summer of 2021, because fans were finally allowed back into the building and shows didn't feel like a funeral. It also meant the audience was pretty forgiving. It was just nice to be back. It was the same for Charlotte Flair and Nia Jax on this episode of Raw, when it just stopped. And I mean that literally. One day I hope we get a book on this because there was some sort of communication breakdown when they paused and looked at each other. That's right, the fighting ended and stare. It was like a T-Rex had turned up. They then started sandbagging and seemingly punching each other in the face for real, which created even more confusion. This is fascinating to watch. It's like they forgot thousands of people were looking on. Because it's not collaborative at all, it looks mad, and how wrestling would be if it was legit, I suppose. Nia's face at one point too, she looks genuinely aghast Flair has done whatever she thinks he's done. I don't have more information, so I can't tell you. Now there is something fun to it because you rarely see two pros fall apart to this degree on Raw, and I would guess that a few hard shots just pissed one of them off. To sum it up in a headline though, this was totally mad. Number 3, Goldust versus the Ultimate Warrior at In Your House 7. Right, let's go the other way, something that's totally lost to the passages of time. Now we do need some caveats. Goldust was the Intercontinental Champion, but did this match basically in pieces. He had a serious injury, and in 1996 the Warrior's mere presence in the company was weird. He'd fallen out with Vince McMahon so many damn times. Due to all the above though, they knew they needed to stall for time, so they did. Warrior went and smoked Marlena's cigar because that'll eat up some minutes, and he then kind of wore their wardrobe, which sent the Hills crazy when they ran around the place literally for minutes. Goldust then got the cigar and burned Warrior's hand, which set him off, and the bad guys were so scared they got counted out. Also meant Dust was still the IC champ. The belt can't change hands on a countout. It also means there's basically zero wrestling in this, and I mean none. Begs the question why the WWF didn't cancel it or do a replacement contest. Even if some fans had been disappointed, it would have made them feel way better than this did. If you put the Benny Hill music over the top, well, that's the vibe. Vince McMahon took it hard publicly too, as he had been promoting the show as the new era and the new generation. It was meant to be a fresh beginning, and if this was the plan going forward, then my gosh, let's get off the wagon now. I would say you should go check this out after listening to me, because you will laugh your ass off. It's such nonsense. But maybe that's the beauty of wrestling. You can actually do whatever the flub you want. Number 2, Chris Jericho versus Neville at the 14th 2016 Raw. So I wanted to include this one to show you how a true pro can handle things. It didn't go exactly according to the new plan, but honestly, if you are an up-and-coming wrestler and need a blueprint on how to balance mistakes, Chris Jericho smashed it. Now, people forget this match with Neville is also really good, as Jericho was having a great 2016. Neville was Neville. The man didn't know how to have a bad match. They were rocking and rolling when Neville went to dive through Chris's legs, though, and rolled his ankle. You could tell it was bad as he just stopped moving, and Jericho realized instantly too, he went into ring general mode. He instantly rolled up his opponent and held the tights to be an asshole while telling referee Charles Robinson to ignore the original plan, as we gotta go home. I don't think Charles heard him. He counts the 1-2 ooh, and man, Chris went nuts. Got in his face and screamed, "He's hurt!" He even gave him a shove. This was most definitely a real reaction. This is where Robinson's brain kicked in too, though, because he got the message and disqualified Jericho for laying his hands on an official. So sure, seeing it get real for a second ain't ideal, but they do hide it well and there's no lost time. Nobody freezes in the moment and they carry on regardless. If Robertson had heard Jericho the first time, this would have been on every single training synopsis: protect your opponent, get the match done. It is still very well pulled off though, even with the slight miscommunication. I mean, compare and contrast it with other entries on this list, it's not even close. Number 1, Tiffany Stratton versus Jade Cargill versus Nia Jax for the 26th of September 2025 SmackDown. So we will throw the one in there that happened recently that everybody wanted to talk about, and if you've watched any of my content, you know my opinion on this. Sometimes bad things happen in the ring. I suppose this goes back to the intro. I don't put any blame on anybody's shoulders. We all go to our jobs and sometimes make a mistake. And that's what happened here. Now, things had actually already taken a turn before this, when poor Jade Cargill was thrown into Simba the Still Steps by Nia Jax, and good grief, the cut that she suffered. She had to have that thing stitched up. You can go on her social media now to see the damage. It will make your stomach turn. I just hope she's alright. This also could have been the reason they went straight to the finish, but essentially after Jade Cargill had slammed Nia Jax to the floor, she went to get the 1-2-3 when Tiffany Stratton was meant to run in and boot Jade and try and steal the pin herself. The issue was Tiffany was a little bit late, meaning Jax had to kick out, so when Stratton went to get the pin, well, I think the referee assumed, well, Nia's going to have to kick out again. She's not suffered any more damage, so why would she lay down for the uno dos tres? As far as Nia Jax was concerned, though, she had been told it was time to go home, so she didn't kick out at all, meaning the referee did the 1, did the 2, and well, the 3 should have come, but instead, nope, we just got silence. And what really makes this somewhat amusing is that Nia Jax looks at the official like, "What are you doing, dude?" Before she realizes, oh, I better kick out, and she does. Now, of course, WWE was just trying to pull off their favorite finish, which was somebody is about to win in a triple threat when somebody else steals the pin. And look, Tiffany Stratton does go up to the top rope, she hits the PME, she gets the 1-2-3, and that rhymes, so it must be true. I really wouldn't put the blame on anybody though, and especially not referee Daphne LaShawn. I think she was just trying to do what was right in the moment, and given that there was a lot of miscommunication, nobody actually knew what that was. Doesn't mean that it was fun to watch from a professional wrestling standpoint, but as we've talked about, Tiffany, Jade and Nia will know this, and I bet they got to the back and face palmed, whereas today they're probably laughing about it, cause yeah, it all fell to pieces, but that can happen. It still wasn't great though, and nobody would pretend otherwise, but listen my friends, it won't be the first time you see it, and it absolutely won't be the last, because this is what makes sports entertainment so damn good to begin with. You are flying by the seat of your pants, and there's absolutely no safety net. With great risk comes great reward. I've run out of Instagram quotes now. Let's just end the video.